It's the same old story. It's been a long day at the job, or maybe it's just starting to feel long, and you feel that urge to stretch your legs and get a little bit of a break. You walk down the street, or maybe you get behind the wheel of your car, and you feel the weight begin to lift. You walk through the doors, and the sound of the place starts to clear the air. You get a table, you order your drink, you listen to the sounds of the bar, and soak in the conversation. Welcome to the TNE Speakeasy, with your hosts, Eric, Isaac, and Caleb. Listen in as I discuss the 1973 film, American Graffiti. Well, here we are, finally arriving at our final stop on the road to Star Wars with American Graffiti. I guess not technically the final stop, that would be arriving at Star Wars. But here we are, and I'm curious for you, Eric, because I think you're the only one coming into this that had seen this prior. What's your experience with this movie?
At the dawn of my awakening with film, which started circa 95, which is when I started taking films more seriously, as a viewer and started to feel more like a participant rather than just watching whatever random thing would be in front of me. It would have been in the late 90s when I probably saw this for the first time, mid to late 90s. And obviously just based upon the George Lucas connection, I probably rented it and saw it on VHS at first, at that time. And then later in the year 99, it was the very first DVD I ever owned. And that's when I watched it more, because I probably only saw it once before that on VHS. And then obviously it was my very first DVD. So I watched it quite a few times in college. And I haven't really ever seen it since.
Yeah, now is that just coming from wanting to check out other films, or maybe for this film in particular, just not having that pull to go back to it?
Yeah, just not having the pull, and I lost my original copy, and I definitely thought about replacing it, and I never really seriously thought about it until I heard about the 4K being released this year, and then I started considering getting it again.
Yeah, and how about you, Isaac? Coming into this for a first viewing, being a Lucas fan, or at least were a Lucas fan when you were younger, I should say. Did you have much drive to check this out, or was it just kind of like, oh, I'll get to it one day?
It was, I think, the latter. I'll get to it one day. But the other thing, of course, was I didn't know if this was available, say, at the video store in our time. It probably was, but again, I'm exposed to this during the everybody knows the famous or infamous documentary Empire of Dreams. This mentions both THX and American Graffiti, and there was a lot more, I guess, positivity with this one for Lucas. I believe. I think he was a lot more. Not that he wasn't unhappy with THX, but well, we obviously saw that there is a director's cut, or the old Lucas special edition of that. And I don't think this one has any special editions as far as I'm aware. Maybe we'll talk about that later. But as for me, yeah, no, this is my first time watching it finally after so many years. Kind of certainly excited for it this time. And I enjoyed it. I know there's maybe not much to talk about it because it's it's kind of a slice of life movie, but we'll get into it. Caleb, what about you? Where do you come into this? Is this your first time watching it? Is this like another time watching this, or where are you at with this film?
First time, and if I was asking myself the same question I asked you, I would also pick the latter. I never had really much of a pull to see it. It always felt like, okay, a little bit of homework. And that mainly comes down to, I always knew that this was held up as one of the great kind of slice of life, coming of age comedies. And that's just a genre that never had any interest for me. I've gotten into a little bit more lately because my partner really likes that genre, so she always pulls ones out to watch. But yeah, I never go out and seek out these kind of films on my own volition. So yeah, I have to kind of drag my feet to get to this. And yeah, there's definitely positives here. I appreciate seeing it, but I did come away with a lot of the same experiences that I have with these types of movies. So I guess to spoil some of my thoughts, it was not a particular favorite. but but where should we start with it? Should we start with the cast, or I don't know? Yeah, I also don't really know how to talk about this because there isn't that much to it.
Eric, if you could briefly, just very briefly, give us, give the audience members here a synopsis, a short one at best, of what it is we're talking about tonight.
Sure. So, American Graffiti. It's 1962, Southern California, somewhere in the Deep Valley. And it's, I guess, probably like a, a day or so after like the last day of school. And we meet a bunch of friends at Mel's drive-in or drive-through. I can't remember what you call those types of Sonic-like restaurants. But it sort of centers around Kurt. His is sort of the central story, sort of, and not really at the same time. But Kurt is dealing with the fact that he's been intending to go to college along with his friend Steve, and Kurt even got like a $2,000 scholarship from the local Moose Club or something. And of course, everyone thinks of him as like a bright kid with like a big future in front of him. But he's having like last minute doubts about going straight to college right after high school, and he isn't sure if he really wants to get on that plane to go to school like the next day. So it's kind of like could be his last day in his hometown. And then he has like an array of friends, like Steve, Ron Howard, and oh man, the nerd Toad. Can't remember the name of the actor right now. Like yeah, those are his buddies, and Steve's sort of like a regular all-American kid. Toad is obviously the nerd geek. And then they have another cool friend who's like a little bit older and previously graduated, who's just kind of hanging around himself. Who's John, who drives like this amazing like 30s hot rod roadster. And then we just kind of follow them with their different storylines that sometimes cross and sometimes don't. Throughout the whole evening, the movie starts at dusk and basically ends a little bit after dawn the next day, and we just kind of follow them around. I mean, that's the basic premise. I don't know how much more in detail you want me to go.
I think that's pretty good right now. Thank you for that summary there, sir. So, Caleb, where would you like to direct us?
I guess we could kind of go through the different characters and discuss what we like or dislike with them. And I don't know if we should start with Kurt, because yeah, his kind of story is the main one, or at least the biggest one. I feel like the one that carries the most emotional punch.
For sure.
I guess I could start with my least favorite one, which is Steve's storyline. That's the one that feels the most thin for me. And as much as I like Ronnie Howard, as they credit him here, as a filmmaker, I just don't really care for his performance either in this. Like, maybe it's just the way the character is. He just kind of feels like an asshole. But I feel like a different performer might have brought a little bit more nuance to it. This guy just feels, yeah, like there's not much there. And his I don't know, struggling relationship with his girl. Like, oh, if we could just manage to hold off for the 3 months, we can maybe get back together. But neither one seemed particularly interested. It's almost like more of like a feels like more of like a possession thing. Like, oh, I don't really want to give this thing that belongs to me up. At least that's the vibe I got. And so yeah, I was like, I don't care about these two. Just break it up and yeah, go have a one night stand or something for your last night. But how about you guys? Am I coming in too negative for this part of it?
I'd like to hear Isaac's take on Steve before I.
Very well. So not the basic premise, but one thing that can contrast with some of our characters here, at least two of them, that is with like Steve and Kurt, is that Kurt has the opportunity. Don't worry, I'll talk about Steve. But like Kurt has the
Sure.
opportunity to go out to the world. He has, like you said, he had like this club that he was in, gave him like a $2,000 scholarship just to go to university or college, whatever it is. And he's having his doubts. He's like, I don't know if I want to, man. It doesn't feel right. I can relate. But Steve, he's the other one. He's the opposite. He's like, I want to like get out of here as fast as I can. Like he wants to see the world and whatnot. And some of his peers, not just his like three other buddies, but some of the other people around him are like, yeah, you're kind of going too fast there, bud. Like just slow down or whatnot. Like so it's very weird that how Kirk gets all this like, yeah, you should go see the world and whatnot. Whereas Steve's like, no, I'm like he wants to keep going places. He wants to like go over the horizon. And the big, the drama here is that his girlfriend Lori, she's not having it. She's a little bit like, she's gonna miss him. They have been together for a while now, and I don't want to say like there's attachment problems there or whatnot. Or attachment issues, excuse me. But she's not like, I guess, handling it well yet, or she hasn't processed it all. So that's where the drama comes from between the two of them. And he even says like, hey, maybe we should see each other, like, or maybe we should, while I'm away, we should like see other people, like, kind of have like an open relationship and whatnot. And that's another thing where the drama comes in, where she's kind of like fed up with him in that sense of just like, yeah, how could you say that or whatnot? And yeah, she's really not having it.
Yeah, because most of the other plots in this have a kind of sense of fun to them. That's the one that every time it shows up, it just kind of feels like a drag. And I'm just like, okay, let's get to some of the other more interesting characters. These two, they're just super flat to me.
It's kind of funny because every time they did cut away from Steve, I actually wanted to go back to see what was going to happen with him and like where his storyline was going to go. I think
Oh, okay.
either maybe between him or Kurt. Maybe I'm wrong with Kurt, but I feel like Steve has like the least amount of screen time. Maybe his storyline. Unless I'm wrong on that.
That. You might be right. Yeah.
Because I was noticing that where there's a part a bit, I think in like the middle of the movie, where they just go like back and forth between Terry, by the way, Toad, aka Toad, excuse me, between Terry, John, and then Kurt, and Steve and Lori, like it's just and this is all in one night, by the way, hilariously, as Eric said, just I find that funny, but we don't get much with it where everybody's going like between locations around town, but yeah, just with Steven, like a lot of him is just he's just like sitting around, and there's a lot of like melancholic introspection on his part as his mind begins to change, and how he hurt Laurie's feelings there. So maybe that's a issue you have with the plot line there, where just the fact that Steve's not got a lot going on potentially. You're like, yeah, no, I can't like that. That's maybe why you're not feeling it too much with him.
Isaac, do you generally like Steve or the character?
See, that's the problem. That's you're bringing up a good point there. I can't tell whether it's I like the character or I like Ron Howard. That's the thing where I almost
okay, that's fine. But there's some element of you liking this character, whether it's the actor or just the portrayal or whatever.
We've seen this kind of character before, the one who wants to chase the horizon, the one who wants to go places and get out of the small town. We know everybody who does that, whether it's like if you live in the city or you don't, where they want to like chase the new opportunities and whatnot, see the world, broaden their horizons. It's a very simple character, and I could see Caleb's perspective how maybe Ron Howard was the wrong kind of pick. Not that he isn't a good actor, but maybe this just wasn't the right performance for him. I don't know. Like I wouldn't say he's like maybe not the. I don't know if there's like a weak link in this entire like movie, but maybe that's just me being biased.
So I feel like I don't know. We'll see what happens. I feel like Caleb is going to force me into an apologist position on this movie.
Oh boy, everybody get ready. Let's play bingo.
Not Isaac as much, but Caleb, I think. And we'll see where Caleb goes from here. But I totally understand the criticisms of the character that Caleb brought up, and true for like the acting performance of Ron Howard. There's nothing particularly stand out about it. I agree on all those points. However, I think he's perfectly fine. Ron Howard and Steve. I think they're Ron Howard's perfectly fine for the role that he has, and I think his function in the movie or the story as being more or less the most average every guy representation for a teenager in this time. I think if that's what his character is supposed to be, I think they do it very, very well.
Oh wow. Sorry to interrupt. Would you say that you felt invested in their relationship tension?
Not a lot, only a little. So yeah, no, their personal relationship or the arc didn't necessarily draw me in, but the representation of who Steve was and who Lori was, I really like. Not because there's anything special to pull me in, but because to me it feels very real or genuine or true to life. So I appreciate that aspect the most when it comes to both of them. Is that I think, yeah, they represent very well like the baseline of a character, either in the real world in the era or just in this type of story. I just think, and that's always an important thing to me in any kind of, no matter what genre type of film I'm watching. Like, do the characters' choices and emotions make sense in the context of the movie universe? And I think 100%. I know there's like definitely skeevy, ridiculous notions in Steve's head in the movie. There's no question about that. And I don't champion that at all. It's just, to me, it just feels so real to kids that age. And I get it. I mean, it just is what it is. And a lot of people that age, whether they're in the boy or the girl's position, it's a tale as old as time, and I'm fine with it because it feels accurately represented to me, and I kind of understand it at the same time. I mean, from a youthful point of view. Obviously, from like an adult-minded person, it's like, gosh, you guys are being so ridiculous, but
Yeah.
that's what 18-year-olds do.
Yeah, and to be also mentioning how I don't really care for coming of age things, I don't watch a lot of teenage dramas. I find a lot of the teen-based anxieties to be just less interesting. And oh yeah, there's these two high school sweethearts who both seem like they don't really like each other very much anymore. They constantly argue. I just couldn't care less about seeing their relationship succeed. It feels like, oh, I'm sure you guys are going to move on and find people much better for you. Also mentioned, since you said you feel like you're going to have to play the apologist against me, point out negativity. I pulled out Steve just so I can get him out of the way, because he's my least favorite part of the movie. The rest of the characters I like a lot more.
No, that's cool.
So, just figured I'd mention that.
I am not emotionally invested in either one of these two characters we're talking about, but I'm still okay with them. And I also have to say that, yeah, teenage coming of age dramas, oh my gosh. Yeah, that has been a genre I've been deeply into since I was quite young. Generally, most movies in that genre I like to varying degrees. Like some extremely, some moderately, some, fine, it is what it is. Kind of how you can watch almost any horror film, regardless of the budget or whatever production values. I'm generally like that with teen coming of age movies. And I've watched many like television teen drama coming of age shows over the years as well. That used to be a genre of television that I used to be very into. So yeah, I have a lot of history with the genre. It was probably the most appealing genre I can remember in film at a young age. And this one, when I got to this one, like I said earlier, like when I saw it the first time, it was the first of this type of genre that I had seen that was sort of like a period piece. Aside from watching the Wonder Years series, um, and and okay, maybe um, the Stand By Me film. Aside from those, this was the first that was more like a traditional high school teen coming of age thing that was in a different period, and so I found that very appealing in my initial viewings. Like like from a historical anthropological point of view, I found it all very interesting.
Yeah, and that is kind of the. Even though I'm not really a fan of these types of comedies, I'm not sure what they're called. Maybe you guys have a better notion. Like these big ensembles where we follow very distinct. It's almost like vignettes or something like that, or like a quasi anthology.
Yeah, that type of storytelling or movie making is called picaresque, when it feels like vignettes. Um, and a couple classic examples of that, especially for this genre, is Fast Times at Ridgemont High
Yeah, I don't like that. Yeah.
and Dazed and Confused. Those two movies and this movie share a lot of DNA, a lot. They are
Mm.
very much all three like in the same wheelhouse.
Yeah, another one I was thinking of is like 200 cigarettes. Don't like that. Or
Haven't seen that one.
there's that one really famous one that takes place around Christmas, like a British one. A whole bunch of big British actors. I can never remember what it's called, but people love that. I'm not a fan at all.
Oh, I think I saw that movie. I can't think of the name either. Doesn't it have the Master in it? The first New Who Master?
Oh, David Jacobi or
No, no, no,
oh no, you mean
no. Sorry, John Sim.
yeah, John Sims.
Is that the movie you're talking about?
I think it has Hugh Grant and Bill Nighy and just a whole bunch of different people. I can't remember what it's called, but yeah, that's just another bias that I figure I should put out there that this particular type of comedy as well has never really worked for me. And part of it is because sometimes you get characters that you're interested in, and then you get storylines that you're just not at all, and it's constantly cutting between the two, and
You're talking about Love Actually.
that could be right. Yeah, I had a girlfriend who loved that, and she would watch every Christmas and every year. I would
No,
just
I absolutely love that movie, and I always considered it a major Christmas film for me personally.
oh
But that is a different genre. I mean, I see how it's relatable to this, but that is much more in the rom com genre. And that movie sort of like reestablished that genre for like the next decade and a half because
yeah,
so many
oof.
films that followed Love Actually in the rom com department were like some version of that type of movie. I mean, it's relatable to this, but that's not a coming of age movie, though.
Yeah, I just mean in terms of the story style, that kind of writing, or structure, I should say. So I just figured I put that bias out there too. That yeah, I might be unfortunately coming in with some just pre-packaged things about this movie that I just can't help from disliking that genre overall.
I'd almost describe Love Actually as being more like it is similar to this style, but it's more similar. I think it's Robert Altman, whoever is the director of the movie Nashville and like the original MASH. Robert Altman is known for that style, and Love Actually is like a version of a Robert Altman film, if I have the right director's name, except it leans more into the comedy with Love Actually. But yeah, that's a whole other subgenre, that Robert Altman thing, which I've appreciated his films that I've seen in the last 2 years, but I haven't seen too many of them.
Oh, but Isaac, do you feel like you have much more for Steve, or maybe we should move on to another character?
Yeah, just give me a few more minutes with him because I have been saying like now I don't know like so this movie was not just George Lucas. This was written also by two other writers, and
Oh dear.
now
Yes.
hang on, and Francis Ford Coppola also co-produces, but also this is the introduction as well. This is important. The introduction, the co-producer was Gary Kurtz, who would then go on Katz. Thank you. Gary Katz, excuse me. He would go on to do the next three Star Wars films, right? Or produce those, right?
That sounds correct. Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Or wait, was he not on Red Jedi? I forget.
Uh,
He did some Temple of Doom, Howard the Duck.
Okay.
Okay, there you go. That's what I was waiting to bring out. Yes, this is the power team behind Howard the Duck. Written with George Lucas. He didn't write Howard the Duck, but also with Gloria Katz and Willard Hayek, or Hayduck. So yeah, my a team that I enjoy for a terrible, terrible film that for some reason tickles my fancy. Howard the Duck. So I was pleased to see them.
Yeah, make this terrible, terrible film according to you.
No, no, no.
Yeah. Sorry. But with Steve, I apologize if I'm going to get meta here. This is just me pontificating as I usually do. I wonder, like, I don't know whether it was one of the three writers, probably not Lucas, but no offense to him. But I don't know if they were like looking at archetypes, whether movie or just you get the archetypes in real life as well. And if Steve is supposed to be modeled after that, so they went with that because this is kind of an ensemble movie, right? With an ensemble cast. So if you don't like one character, like Caleb does, then there's at least something else. There's another person's storyline where you're like, okay, I like this. This one seems a lot more interesting than Steve, so I don't feel not completely invested in this film. So I don't know if they were commenting on those kind of archetypes in real life, or even the ones to come. Because I guess Steve is kind of just like the average guy, I suppose. Like, what's he got going for him? Well, no, he's got that thing where, like I said, he wants to, go out and see the big world. He's the Disney Renaissance protagonist of I want adventure in the great wide worlds in the great wide distance. I want more than this. This very simple life. So I guess the idea is, we're going to like switch him and Kurt up where it's like, by the end of the movie, he's going to, appreciate where he comes from. And Kurt's going to be like, all right, let's go out to the world and see. Cause I guess that's those two kinds of people. And they want to do that, but what they need is, the opposite in this case.
No, I totally agree. I think that was probably part of their game plan in creating the character and other characters. I agree with everything you said, and I also think the way you're describing him, like as an archetype or whatever, or where he fits in all this, I guess he's kind of like the Ron Weasley in the group. Not entirely Ron Weasley, but I think they cross over a lot in terms of their characters.
Yeah, and just for a critique with him, which I feel like for me would have improved that character, is because at the end of this he chooses to move away from his push forward mentality and I'll stay here for a while. And I guess his main motivation was he just wanted to stick around for that girl. Do you guys disagree? Do you think that was his main purpose for sticking around?
I think probably yes, but I also I was a little bit confused at the end because I couldn't tell if he was still going to leave or not, but maybe I just missed something.
I think he said like, I'll give it some time.
Yeah, he said I'll be there next year. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Oh, I thought he meant like I'll be back home or wherever they're meeting up. But okay, that's fine.
Yeah, going to the school.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's about the girl.
Yeah, and that's I felt like it would have been more fun to see him like, oh, this is my last, kind of like what happens with Kurt, I guess, but with just falling in love with the town instead of this very trite romance. That just, it made the end result feel flat. It's exciting for Kurt, a character that I like much more, but the Steve part of it's just kind of like, okay, it just feels like the most boring choice for him. But again, I don't want to keep hammering the movie. Yeah, maybe we should.
That's fair.
Yeah, I don't feel like Steve's doing the heavy lifting in this movie, so that's why I don't really think about it too much.
He's just one aspect, and I guess just showing, hey, this is that kind of person where these two characters have been together for a very long time, and so kind of losing them, or them having a wedge between each other, kind of like they're meant to be together. I know that sounds boring, but they're meant to. They can't function without each other, so it's like it can be boring. I will say that I do prefer this film over Grease, over Animal House, even over Fast Times at Ridgemont High. It's almost like those were parodying this. Not really, of course, but I kind of like, and those are all like well after this film, so I'm surprised how straight I guess this film plays it, which I kind of enjoy.
Yeah, I like all those other movies you mentioned for other reasons.
Yeah.
So I don't necessarily match them all up against each other like a head to head. But that being said, I still also agree that I do like the groundedness of this movie as compared to those other ones you brought up. Because this movie kind of set up where this genre was going to go for like the next 20 or so years in film. This is kind of the one that kicked it all off. In a way of what I was saying last time with THX, how so many sci-fi films that followed it, you can kind of trace the linkage, even if it's unintentional. This movie is that for this genre, very much so.
And I mean, to be fair, Steve did have to stay in this town because after that, he was, he had to stay in this town, or else how were they going to film the pilot to Happy Days?
Oh, I did find out because I was curious. I was like, wow, these roles seem like it seems interesting. Like I knew Happy Days came out after this. I was like, oh, I wonder if Happy Days cast him because of this movie. But it turned out that they'd actually produced an unaired pilot that George Lucas saw for Happy Days, and that's why he cast Ron Howard here.
Okay.
I did not know which way that went.
Yeah, I
thought
that was interesting.
What's interesting about Happy Days, because obviously I watch it growing up, and what's interesting is that many, like, I don't know if you guys ever watched Happy Days.
No, I have. I've seen it.
Yeah, me
it's
too.
It's actually a lot of fun.
There's sort of like 3 phases of it generally over time, but the very first phase, like the very first season and the earliest episodes, the first episodes of that show are actually a lot more grounded, feeling like the way this movie is. It feels much more realistic and less sitcom-y at the very beginning, but then it quickly becomes more like the version that most of us are accustomed to.
Turns into like Family Matters. Family Matters, I feel like, had a similar progression.
Yeah, and then once Richie leaves off Happy Days, then it basically becomes a modern sitcom where they like it kind of like MASH. Like it doesn't even feel like it's even supposed to be the past anymore. It feels like people cosplaying like they're in the past, but everything else it generally feels modern, like in the later seasons.
Yeah, and sadly, that's the version that I always think of in my head. I think I must have just seen more of that.
That's the worst version.
I know.
That's the absolute worst version.
Then every now and again, I would see some of the older stuff. I'd be like, "Whoa, this feels so much better and different." And stuff.
That's post shark
good.
jump.
I was gonna say, is this the post jumping the shark? Literally.
Yeah.
Actually, can I quickly ask Caleb? Can I ask? Do you think this film does a good job of portraying the '60s? I want to say yes, only because, like, again, it doesn't look because of George Lucas, like the camera work, and looking at it, if this is like the closest thing to like 4K on my end at least, I like it a lot. It does not feel like a '70s film to me.
No, that's very true. Yeah, filmography wise or cinematography wise, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, thank you. Cinematography
and costumes. I'm having a hard time saying because I don't watch, and the ones that I've seen I thought were just horrible. I don't watch 60s teen comedies or dramas. That's just something I avoid. And so I guess this feels similar to some of the ones I've seen, and those are not good examples, but this would be better than most of those. But I don't know. Eric, what do you think?
Okay. So when I first saw this, again, that was when I was first diving into film seriously. And so I wasn't the relative expert on like 20th century US anthropology, like I've obsessed with since. And like I'm quite knowledgeable about that now because it's something that I am just really obsessed with when I watch films in general. So when I first saw this, because of a lot of the musical choices, especially, I totally assumed it was the 50s.
Yeah, that's fair.
And I totally thought that because at the time I didn't realize when the 50s aesthetic of the United States, I didn't know when it actually started to fade. I know that now, but at the time I didn't. But now knowing that it is 62 or whatever, I think for the most part, yes, it does capture the time period very, very well, as y'all said. I'll just slightly differ from Isaac in that while they pull it off really, really well, I can still sense it's the early 70s for the production. There's little small subtle tells that I'm just extremely sensitive to. But it's not a big deal. Like it's almost not even worth me mentioning that, because overall, yeah, they just really pull it off for the most part, um, and it's not distracting in any way.
Yeah.
For movies, oh no, I was gonna say, because I was thinking of Lolita, which we saw some months ago, and I mean that was produced, what, in '62 or '63. So at least you could see kind of like how filmmaking was, and you could see a little bit of what teen life was like in a movie from that time. But yeah, I mean that's it. Yeah, I can tell it's the early '70s, but no, it's really done well.
One more thing with Steve, Caleb, what did you think of like the chemistry between both actors with when it came to like the relationship? Was, regardless of if you didn't care for it, do you think they like were a good pair, or do you think it didn't work out too well?
Well, that's more a question of intent on what the filmmakers were trying to say with this, because I definitely feel that they're a kind of a caustic couple. Like I feel that that unpleasant energy running between them. I don't know if that was intentional. I don't know if we're supposed to see that in them. I don't think so.
I would say yes. I would. I no. I feel like that is the intent.
Oh, but then isn't it even more bittersweet that he chooses to stay in the town with her in the end and throw away his first year of college?
Not for me. I think, again, as I said, I appreciate it because it feels very grounded in reality. And these sorts of couples obviously existed and still exist in people this age. And going forward, like past this point in their relationship, sometimes they work out in real life and sometimes they don't. And we don't know unless you watch the sequel. But we don't know, if we just constrain ourselves to this movie. And I don't know, I'm fine with it. And and maybe his staying back is a great choice for his character, or maybe it's not a good choice for either of them. But just based on this movie alone, it is what it is. I know that sounds like an unsatisfying answer, but it's just what I think.
But just, I guess, to answer, just overall, I just never wanted to cut back to them. I never liked the energy that they brought to the screen or their character dynamic. So even if they are selling it really well, they sold it to the point that I was just completely disinterested in whatever was happening with them. So
Well, I will agree. It is the least interesting character and storyline for me to follow as well. It just doesn't bother me. But yeah, it's the least.
yeah, and that's why I feel bad we spent so much time focused on it,
I know
because
it's kind of funny.
it is. I brought it up just to get it out of the way.
That's. Do you not remember like us talking for an hour about Jake Sully and Avatar?
I know. I kept trying to move away from it there
I
too.
know that's definitely fair. I will say at least quickly, I do like Lori. I like how she kind of matches evenly with Steve when it comes to like quips, or how she can hold her own against him, even though like, she still needs him. But I don't know. I like Cindy Williams' performance, and hey, she could have been Princess Leia, so that's kind of why I admire her as well.
Well, that would be weird. But yeah, no, I like her in this. Her acting and everything. Because I know I'm not really talking about the sequel, but the actress and the characters in the sequel. And when they made that movie in '79, that was already like post Happy Days, Laverne Shirley fame. So in the sequel, she feels more like her TV character, and I kind of don't like that. I mean, for this universe, I like seeing this version, like the proto version of her, rather than seeing her TV persona being in a film.
But or somebody else pick which character to focus on next.
You gotta do John or Terry next.
Yeah, I feel like we should save Kurt till last because I know that's like if that's your favorite character, we got to see the best for last.
Well, I didn't say he was my favorite, but
Oh no, I was talking about Caleb. Like Caleb's like Kurt is Caleb's favorite character in this film.
Hey, I didn't say that either.
Okay, fair enough.
but I'd say John or Terry. Which one are we gonna go next?
Yeah, I picked the first one. That's why I was passing it to you guys.
All right, we'll do Terry next.
Okay, we're gonna go do good old Toad in this one. Eric, what'd you think of Toad?
I always kind of found him kind of appealing in the movie in a comedy relief sense. I mean, it's already like kind of one of the first funny things you see in the movie when he's pulling in on his moped into the drive-through or drive-in.
Dine in.
And the actor, I forget where he pops up. Is it? I don't know if it's Close Encounters, um, but he has like a bunch of character roles, like in early '80s films, and I knew him as that older version um, before I saw this the first time. And for some reason, just seeing him play like a nerdy teen, like he just seems so perfect for the role. And I have just I've just always like enjoyed him in this movie. A lot of his scenes or mini stories or whatever you want to call them are some of the ones I remember the most from when I used to watch this back in the day. And and then after I saw this as well, I would just love seeing him pop up in films. Once I realized his role in this particular movie, so I just think he's great generally. I like his antics. One of the scenes that has stuck in my mind the most from this movie over the years is just the part when he's trying to get the liquor um, from the liquor store. I've always remembered that scene, and I've seen other versions of it done in other films and television, but this is like the original for me of the young kid with no ID trying to get stuff, and it's like the oldest gag now. But the whole, okay, I'll take a comb, some batteries, stick of gum, um, you know, I can't remember the name, but Grey Goose, and and it's the original in my mind for that type of scene. And yeah, I like them.
Yeah, and for both those scenarios, the standing outside the liquor store trying to get booze and the yeah, in my case buying cigarettes and yeah, loading up like, oh, I'll just get all these things and you just slip in the cigarettes. I did both those things many, many times in my teenage years and to mostly successful results. So it was very relatable seeing that. Yeah. And I feel like this part of the plot feels the most dynamic and it feels like there's the most kind of, yeah, maybe outlandish plot elements going on. And I think that most of them play off pretty well. I was always looking forward to any time we cut back to Toad or Tiger in his storyline.
And yeah, and then him being matched up with, is it Candy?
Debbie.
Oh, I'm sorry. The actress's name is Candy.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, Candy Clark.
Yeah, but that's another archetype, I guess. I mean, not just her, but their whole dynamic. Like
Uh-huh.
the little bit messed up girl with a heart of gold or whatever. Yeah, it is what it is, but it just works, even though it's predictable, I guess.
Yeah.
For me, it just works. Um, and the pair of them, but especially her, retroactively very much reminds me of the relationship in the remake of Little Shop of Horrors.
Oh, okay.
With
Okay.
Rick Moranis and his love interest.
Uh-huh.
And like when I first saw her in the movie today, Debbie, I almost thought it was the same actress as the actress in the remake of Little Shop of Horrors because they look so alike. The only difference is the one in Little Shop, she has this super high pitched little girl voice, but other than that, they're like extremely similar.
Yeah, and Candy Clark is an actress I've seen quite a bit of. She had kind of a B-movie career after this, but during the 70s, she had an extremely memorable role in a movie I saw earlier this year, The Big Sleep. Oh boy, does she. If you've seen that movie, you remember her in it.
I have not seen that movie.
So I was very happy to see her pop up again so quickly.
Yeah, and not that she's not pretty in this, but she's really pretty in the sequel. Just saying.
Yeah, and she plays this super wild character who gets herself wrapped up in some pretty crazy situations in The Big Sleep. And yeah, if you like her in this, yeah, she's way attractive in that. So recommend.
Oh, I'll need to write that down. No, I like her in this movie for sure. Like she's one of those characters who easily could have come across as like boring or two-dimensional. But no, I like her a lot.
Yeah, and I enjoy, and yeah, it is a bit, maybe predictable, but I like that she ended up enjoying this chaotic date that she winds up on with this guy, getting the car stolen, getting into that fight, even just his little exchange at the liquor store, and someone stealing the booze too. That's also happened to me as well. Some people just they'll be like, oh, I guess I'm gonna punish this teenager trying to get booze illegally. I'll just take their money. So yeah, very memorable.
Did you get shot at?
I was never shot at. No, thankfully.
That aspect was a little bit over the top. Um, it just that little bit, the fact that the guy runs out and the storekeeper shoots at him, that little bit reminded me of like the antics that would happen in slapstick comedies in the mid to later 70s.
That's
Um,
fair.
like that's totally the kind of thing that would happen in those more over the top slapstick comedies of the day.
Yeah,
Thankfully, they didn't lean too much into that in this movie.
yeah, that I prefer more absurdist kind of comedy, so I don't mind those kind of moments seeping in there. But but yeah, where else to go with this side of the plot? Hmm.
Hang on, I haven't even said my piece.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
Thank you.
sorry. Yeah, so we have Terry. He's not stereotypical, but he's the Poindexter type. He probably seems he has some intellect to him because you got the glasses there, and he's the one, I guess, nerdy kid or whatnot who wants to have a date. He's been given the keys. He's been given Steve's keys to his good old vehicle, and as we see, he's not the best driver or whatnot. I love that first scene where he's like, pulls him with his vest button, and it's still like, he doesn't turn it off, and then it like smashes right into the garbage can there. That was hilarious, and I love that little bit in the end, not end, but like when they're back at the dine-in or the diner, excuse me, where you actually see Vespa is still there, and they haven't done anything with the trash cans. That's pretty funny. But yeah, he's wanting to use the fact that he got this opportunity of using Steve's car to go around town and kind of like prove himself to some people.
Yeah.
Whether he's gonna pick up chicks or whatnot, or start racing people, like rev up his engine and whatnot to race some buds. Just set at that light, and then it turns out it's a green arrow left turn signal, and he's about to go, and he backs up and smashes into that other guy, and that was a funny one as well. They actually used both those bits for footage when they were talking about American Graffiti and Empire of Dreams, and I remember that line very clearly. That was a lot of fun there. But importantly for Terry, excuse me, he has Old Harper, by the way. That's the drink that he was trying to get his hands on. I don't know if that's a drink at all, like a real one. I assume it is. But the big important thing is that there's setup. There's a setup with him, and that's involving a certain character who he encounters with his hot rod, where he's like, all right, I see this guy with his cowboy hat, he's gonna rev the engine, and the other guy like revs his engine and it sounds like the Millennium Falcon. It's like, yeah, I don't stand a chance there. So and then he mentioned something to him. It was like, hey, you know where John is. So we'll put a pin in that. We'll definitely put a pin in that. So that's important setup there. But yeah, him, not to repeat everything that you guys say, I love the fact that he speaks highly of himself, and he starts making up this all imaginary stuff like hullabaloo and stuff, and just to impress Debbie. I liked her as well. I liked it would seem like she'd be the typical I gotta say this correct, but where she's not exactly. I think people would call her like an airhead, for instance, where it is not there, but she really is there. She's got there. There's some stuff there, even if she has had many boyfriends or whatnot. I feel like there's some stuff to her there where she's kind of adventurous as well. Where love when they're in the woods near the canal. She's like, oh, the hookman or whatever it was.
Oh yeah, I like that.
One that's gonna tear people's heads off or whatever, and put your head in the place of your arm or something like that. I'm like, all right, I kind of like that. She's a little bit adventurous, and he's the diminutive one. I know people might be like, oh, he's emancipated or whatever. Sorry, I forgot the terms.
Emasculated?
Thank you, emasculated and over him.
He could be both.
Yeah, it's like stalactites and stalagmites, but he's less of a man, and she's more of a man than he is. I don't really care about that. I like that dynamic there, and even in the end, she still likes him for who he is, even if he did lie about all stuff like, I got a Jeep at home. I used to hunt animals when I got a bunch of guns. I got a Jeep, on the Jeep I have a gun rack. Yeah, I kind of like that, and you think that she would leave him in the end, but no, she enjoys it. And hey, she's kind of into Vespas because they're the closest thing to motorcycles.
Yeah, and I just wanted to mention, since you brought up that little her telling the story about, I think it was the goat head killer or something like that.
The goat. Thank you. Yeah, the goat head killer.
I love that in the background. I couldn't tell if it was meant to be diegetic or just for the audience. They're constantly playing goat noises as she's talking. I thought that was quite funny.
Well, it definitely becomes diegetic when they're walking off, and then he's like, "What's that?" Because in the closed captions it mentioned the
Well,
what do you call the sound of a goat? I don't know if it was neigh or whatever it was.
Bah.
well, but they make it confusing because wasn't it Steve? Wasn't it just him walking around in the woods?
Yeah, because Steve shows up, right?
Oh, I thought it was when it was still Terry and Lori, and he's like afraid, and then there's like a sound of a goat as they're walking.
Yeah, he doesn't he show up right after they're talking about the killer?
Yeah.
Soon after, yeah.
Well, because so Debbie goes to like investigate something. I don't remember what it was, and then he stands there. He's sitting there, and he's muttering to himself, and then like turns his head, turns back, it's like, Debbie, where'd you go? And then like for brief few seconds, he's like alone, and then Steve shows up.
Yeah. It's around that time. Yeah, the sound of the goat.
So yeah, maybe there was a goat. Yeah, I couldn't quite tell.
Yeah, I think it was meant to be in the universe.
I think this is just very random. Pardon me for saying this, but there was a bit where he throws up, and then he finds Steve's car after it gets hijacked, or Grand Theft Auto, excuse me, and then he's trying to hotwire the car, and then these two punks show up and try. I think maybe it's one of them, but there's an actor in this called, I don't know if it was one of him or not, but there's an actor in here called Johnny Weissmuller Jr. I'm pretty sure that's the obvious. It's the son, I assume, of Johnny Weissmuller, the famous Tarzan actor. So I believe he was also listed in the credits of THX. So I guess he's a returning character or an actor, I suppose. But yeah, I just want to throw out because I liked his father as Tarzan. So
no, that's fair.
No, that's cool.
And I did want to point out as well. You brought up him going out cruising, looking for. Either to show himself up as being cooler than he is, or maybe to pick up a chick.
Yep.
When he comes across Debbie, oh man, this she's just walking down the street, and we see all these creepy ass bikers. They're whistling and howling at her, and they're even bending down to like look up her dress.
Yep.
And she's just trying to keep quiet and keep like not drawing attention. And then he pulls up and starts harassing her too, asking if she wants a ride, and she's just not even looking at him, just shaking her head. I was like, oh, there's a little peek of disturbingness creeping in. And we get a little bit more of that in John's story as well. There's creepy hound dog men running around.
Yeah, no, that's not the case. And I think I guess Terry's story kind of ends not early. His is like the earliest to finish because she leaves, I think, before the race, right?
Yep, she does.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so his story is the first to complete. Or at least resolve, excuse me. So, just I guess that tidbit there.
Yeah, and so does that bring us over to John?
Anything else, Eric, from Terry?
No, just that there's I don't think Old Harper is a real thing. There is an IW Harper that's a real whiskey.
Okay,
but I don't think there's an Old Harper.
There ain't no wine. I know that for a fact. I guess we now go to John, the Anakin Skywalker looking. Tough guy, but he's a jerk with a golden heart or whatnot. Who rides around town in that hot rod of his with the license plate numbers THX138.
Yep. Got to get that little reference in there somewhere. Which, did you guys like that, or was that a little bit too much?
No, it's fine.
No, I liked it, and I never knew it really, and I never really saw it until today. I may have read it at some point in the last 10 years, but this is my first time noticing it, so I never noticed it before. And no, I think it's great.
Yeah, and I definitely also noticed there's like a cinema in the background at one point, and they're playing Dementia 13. So I was like, oh, there's another little callback for Francis Ford Coppola, his first feature. But, so John, yeah, what do you guys think about this one?
Eric, you go first.
I like John. I love John. John might be my favorite in the movie. I mean, there's not much to him other than what you kind of already explained about his character. I mean, yeah, he comes off as just a typical jerk initially. But no, but at the end of the day, he's just a good old boy in the best possible sense,
Oh no.
in the best possible sense.
Eh,
And no, I just generally like him, and I understand his plight very well. And there's often these types of characters in these types of genre films. Um, the one who's a little bit older and kind of still hanging around and not really going anywhere personally,
yep.
who the kids in high school idolize,
Yeah.
but it's very obvious that that's not really how the character feels on the inside about themselves. That yeah, they are chasing their youth, but that's kind of really all they got. Um, so yeah, definitely a familiar archetype for this genre. But I also remember I knew a few guys like this when I was in high school, like the recent graduates, and I always detested those guys in real life. I always thought, God, you're such a loser. You're such a loser. That's how I used to think when I was a teenager myself. But
Oh yes.
just what goes on with him, and then having the dynamic of Carol Mackenzie Phillips, I just love those two. I they're probably my favorite pairing in the movie, and I don't mean pairing romantically, but pairing
Yeah.
just being alongside each other, like for their storyline. Yeah, I like them, and I actually like her a lot too, to be honest. Yeah, they're probably both my favorite characters in the movie.
Yeah, it's one of the things that stands out because it feels like one of the more unique kind of dynamics for this type of movie. You take this kind of late greaser type stand-in character, and then pair him up with this just little kid who wants to have fun, and he's just out cruising too. He's looking for some chick to hook up with. Winds up with this little 12-year-old kid. I think there's something just fun about that, and about him kind of softening with her. I like that quite a bit. And I'm glad they didn't lean too much into like some sort of creepy romance thing, even if it was just like one side on her part. It might have taken away a little bit from the fun. So I'm glad that they didn't go in that direction.
So yeah, sorry, my apologies. I'm looking at the scene right now, where Terry and Debbie are having drinks out near the canal. Sorry, this is I think poignant, where he's so trying to get that what was it, the old what was it called again? Old Debbie, not Old Debbie, Old Harper. And I think I just saw that he put, what is it? He had like Coke or something like that. Like
Yeah,
he put
yeah.
like he was drinking a Coke and she was drinking the rum or the whiskey. Excuse me. So it's kind of funny. I never noticed that until now.
I didn't pay attention that much. I just assumed that he was just making
That's what I thought.
whiskey and Coke for both.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, that's what it was. Okay, never mind. I thought it. And also, I just want to say I love his shirt. By the way, I love how like it's pink, and I don't know. I like that. I definitely want to get a shirt like that for myself. I thought it was really attractive. John, aka Proto the Fonz, I guess. Literally feels like it. Yeah, I like him a lot. I think I kind of agree with Eric where the relationship between him and Carol is really attractive, and I don't mean that. Hold on a second. I just mean that in the sense of it's nice to look at because it feels genuine, and they start off their relationship basically. They become like friends, and yeah, they're kind of ribbing at each other. They're throwing shade at each other every now and then, but in the end, yeah, I like how it becomes it's a friendship in the end, and that's I guess it's a little less caustic than say Steve and I forgot her name. I
Lori?
apologize, Lori. Thank you. So, Caleb, that's definitely a plus for you on that one. Yeah, the uncomfortable scene, of course, I think Caleb was mentioning before was she gets in the car, whatnot, and when the policeman gets him, I want to talk about the scene as well. But when right before the policeman comes in, it's like if you don't do any unless you like say these words, I'm gonna say that you sexually assaulted me. But they use the other word. It's like that's something, but hey, it's definitely true.
Well, yeah, there was that bit which definitely, felt dated. Not a funny, unless you're watching modern Bollywood films where it comes up a lot of times in supposedly comedic exchanges.
Yeah, different culture.
I've actually seen a scene that plays almost identical to this in a Bollywood movie I watched from a year or so ago.
Well, different cultures, so maybe they're still okay with that.
For me, it's a zero burger for me.
Yeah, I figured.
Of course, for you.
Because, well, not just that, but again, just in the context of the movie and the period, and even if the period was the 1990s or 2000s.
Did it play funny for you?
No, I didn't think it was funny. I just thought it was just real.
As a matter of fact, that's what Eric kind of saw it as. It's a matter of fact.
Yeah. Kind of a matter of fact. No, I didn't think it was funny.
Do you think it was meant to play as funny?
The her making the threat, yeah, a little bit. Yeah, I think it was, but I think what doubled down more on the funny, I can't remember if that was the exact same scene or not. But I think it's just before that, when he tries to hide her and he puts like her head down in his lap.
Yeah,
I think that was
funny
a little bit. Yeah, like, or in the same vein, I guess, as going for funny. Yeah, I think it was meant for funny, but I don't respond to comedy like quote unquote normal people do, so that's why I didn't find it humorous personally. But that's because I'm an oddball. That's not the movie.
Yeah, no, and and she was like, "Is this what they call cupping a feel?" It's like, whoa, okay, fair enough.
Yeah, that's a good. That's a good scene though. That one.
But I more meant in the end. I could see them pushing it at the end of her being like, oh, she was attracted to him and wanted to end it as if it was a date, which they sort of do. I was glad that they played it back more instead of maybe leaning into it to make it more like sappy or something. That side of the plot was always more fun, and it was nice to have one side of it that wasn't about, I guess, just base sex pretty much for the other three plots.
Yeah, thankfully.
It's not like Kurt really knew the chick that he was going after this whole time. It was just it was more sexual in that way. We'll get more into that. There's more to it than just that. But
anyway, I like I like the part with the policeman where him and John basically know each other. He's just like, "How you doing, John?" It's all right. Well, it was a John Wick film. But it's like, the policeman is he's always after John. But the cool thing about that is that he keeps giving him these tickets, and I love how he gives Carol the ticket, and then she opens up like the side pocket or wherever it is, and just like you see a lot of crumpled other tickets that he's probably never paid for or whatever, demerit slips. I don't know what you call it. Yeah. And then he like, I like the sheriff's like even though I'm giving you a warning here or whatever, the slip. I'm not gonna get fine you just yet. I'm not gonna get because I want to see you like catch you in the act. I'm like, I kind of like that. That's something cool with that adds to John.
The way you described it, you reminded me of the Looney Tune cartoon. I think the character in Looney Tunes is a wolf, but he looks like exactly like the coyote.
Yes,
but he's not the coyote. I think he's a wolf.
It's like proto coyote.
Yeah.
And it's him, and I don't know what type of dog that's supposed to be with the hair or the fringe, the bangs that cover his eyes. And in the Looney Tunes cartoons, they always like meet up at the beginning and they like clock in, and then they go into their antics of him trying to steal sheep and the dog, catching him. So the way you described their relationship reminded me very much of those Looney Tune characters.
One way of putting it, I like that a lot. Thank you for mentioning that. I think we'll save maybe the race for the end if that's okay with you guys, unless you want to talk about it now, just because that's kind of where like all the plot lines sort of merge together.
Yeah, that's fine.
Caleb, are you okay with that, or do you want to like just talk about it?
Yeah,
now?
That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah. What I will say is another thing that I really enjoy about this movie overall, and it mainly crosses over with John and Terry's side of the plot, is I really enjoy all the kind of worshipping of the car scene in this little town. So getting to see all those shots of them driving around, just talking to random people in other cars around you, I think all that stuff has a really quaint and fun quality to it. And it was actually making me think of a movie that Eric very much didn't like, but that I like a whole lot, called Pit Stop, which is also about kind of a small town racing scene, a little bit more focused on the actual professional racing. But I always appreciated car movies in general. So I definitely like that aspect of this one.
I mean, those aspects on the street in Pit Stop, those were fine. And just the movie overall, yeah, not my cup. But yeah, of course I like all that stuff that you're talking about, the cruising. I mean, that's what kind of one of the most memorable aspects of this movie, I think, for people who are fans of it. And when I was in high school, not because of this movie, but I was living in that world, in my world. Um, I, Me and my friends in high school were definitely into cruising, um, and it was more similar to how you see it portrayed here than it was different, like our version. Um, Extremely similar, because for me watching it today, me as a viewer today, it kind of annoyed me how often they were going up and down the same street. Like I was just picturing
Yeah.
them shooting like literally on the same street over and over and over again.
Uh-huh.
That kind of bothered me now. But on the other hand, when I used to do it myself in real life, that's literally how it goes. So I mean, it just is what it is. It's kind of a little bit repetitive for me in a film now, but it's true to life again. Um, and so yeah, of course I love that stuff. Uh, I was going to say, did you guys notice? I mean, during the Carol John scenes, did you guys notice like the reference or the connection to Mandalorian?
Nope.
That came out of nowhere.
Because there's an ongoing gag in the Mandalorian series that is definitely a callback to a particular John Carroll scene.
Lay it out for me. I don't pay that close of attention to the Mandalorian.
Yeah, unless like you have to explain it, it's over my
Yeah,
head.
but it's not subtle in the Mandalorian though. It's not subtle at all, and it's done. It's called back to multiple times in the Mandalorian. Um, it's when Carol starts noticing the knob on the gear shift.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, that thing.
Yeah, do you guys remember that in Mandalorian now?
No.
Oh
No.
no, I just said like, oh yeah, the little like gag, not gag, but the little thing that connects the two of them together, and he gives to her in the end.
But wow, Caleb, you don't recall? I mean, they call back to this like I don't know 6 or 7 times throughout Mandalorian, like all seasons.
I feel like I remember one scene of him handing something like that to Grogu, but I only watched it all once. I did not pay that close of attention.
Yeah, it's one of their first like bonding moments early in the series, where Grogu is like obsessed with the knob on one of the controls. I can't remember the name of the ship right now, but he's like obsessed with it, and he's always like taking it off. He's always trying to play with it.
Okay, yeah, you're sparking some memories saying it, but
Yeah, and Mando's always trying to get it back, and it's not a toy, and he's always putting it back, and the way they use that dynamic specifically around the knob in the Mandalorian series overall, the back and forth with it throughout the series, like reflects like where their relationship is as you go through, and it plays a key moment, like in season 2 as well. Yeah, and when he mild spoiler, when Mando loses his ship, it's like the one piece that survives that he takes with him. So yeah, definite callback to this movie without question. And obviously it's not exactly the same, but there's obviously similarities with Mando and Grogu's relationship in these two.
One thing that was odd to me, or at least one thing I noticed, is that I think he's got a pack of darts in his t-shirt, but it's like near his shoulder.
It's camels.
I figured it because it looked like the camel itself, and I'm like, is that what I think it is? And I didn't know if that's a thing that people do where they just literally stick it in
Yes.
there near their shoulder. I'm like, oh, okay,
Yes, I'm old enough to remember when that was a common thing.
there you go. Caleb, you ever do that before?
I've never done it myself, but I did have an uncle who always had his cigarettes that way. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Because I assume like if you were wearing a shirt with like breast pocket, I assume you would just put your darts there. But yeah, no, that's just one of the weird places I've seen it before.
Oh yeah, it's usually t-shirts.
Yeah, I always thought it was strange because he'd always have to unfold it to take out a cigarette pack. And he'd frequently wear shirts too that would have the like the pockets in them, like the breast pocket. And I always just was like, why don't you just keep it in there? Then you can just reach it more easily.
Yeah,
But maybe it's just an old school thing.
I don't remember people with pockets doing it much, but I just remember dads in the 80s. A lot of guys, very common, very, very common. And probably the last times I saw that practice were probably in like my early days in the army. There was some guys who did that.
I want to also mention maybe potentially. I was wondering like with when Carol was talking about her her home life or whatnot. Obviously, I hope she's not abused and whatnot. She's she's kind of hard on herself. I remember when when Guy driving the Millennium Falcon shows up initially. I won't say it. He's it's like, hey, you want? She's like, hey, you looking for like an ugly girl like me? It's like, whoa.
I love that. That's so funny. Yeah, she's. What did she say? That do you remember? I wrote it down here, but I'm just looking at my notes to try to find it.
It's coming up in real time on my screen. I'll let you know when I see
Oh,
it.
I found
I'm
it.
well past that scene.
Yeah, she said, "Your car's uglier than I am," and then she looks at it aside like that didn't come out right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that was a good. Yeah, that was a good one.
And then we cut to Harrison Ford's face, and has like a moment of confusion.
Like, what the flip? Okay, I wasn't expecting that. Yeah, I like her. Like, she seems like she's not the most popular. Like, she's up and coming. Obviously, she's not much younger than he is. I mean, she's probably preteen, if not early teenager. But I was wondering when she was giving her whole spiel on her home life, again, hopefully not abused or anything like that. I was wondering if John could relate, if his home life was a little bit similar as well, and so that's where he kind of like started to bond with her over the fact that they have something in common there.
Yeah, I think in that sense, I agree that I think he relates to her in that way. What are you gonna say, Caleb?
I was gonna say this is the era of old school parenting. I'm sure most people are getting abused. That's just.
Oh yeah, no,
yeah. No, yeah, definitely. To some degree, not everybody, obviously, but yeah. I mean, if you drop a hint like that in a movie, it's obvious subtext. But also, okay. First of all, I know you referred to, I think, the black car is like the Millennium Falcon, and I get it, but I actually think of John as more the Han Solo type character.
Oh, he is.
This movie, yeah. But the thing about Carol, and you're talking about like her background in the movie. The problem with that, or the weird part, because you guys talked about some certain parts already that maybe feel a little bit cringe, or I don't know what word you want to use to describe it when you watch it in modern times. And I don't get that feeling throughout most of this movie, except for this kind of aspect about Carol, which is the meta connection to it. So outside of the movie. Are you guys familiar with that or know what I'm talking about?
Are you about to like relate the fact that these two are proto Han Solo and Princess Leia?
No. Okay. Nothing with Star Wars.
I really didn't look too much into the background, so unless it's something to do with the actress.
The actress, yes.
Educate us, please, sir.
So people my age and older are very aware of this as it pertains to the actress, because in the late, or maybe it was in the mid 90s, she was like on Oprah or something, because she had like an autobiography coming out, or memoirs, and this was like the big selling point, and so she was pushing it like on the talk shows everywhere and putting it all out there. So that's why everyone my age and older, like, we all know this. Like, so her father in real life was from the band The Mamas and the Papas. And in her book, she talks about how from a young age into her adult years, she had I think it was, for the most part, consensual, incestuous relationship with her father.
Consensual.
That's her words. That's not my words. I believe. I haven't looked this up in a while. And so obviously I've been aware about that since forever. And so, like, hearing those lines and thinking about the actress here, every time she mentioned her dad in the movie, I couldn't help but think about her dad in real life.
Yikes.
Yeah, that's pretty. That's pretty. Yikes.
That's heavy. Yikes. Yeesh.
Yeah, so that's what I gotta say about that.
My condolences to her. Wow, yeah, okay, sorry about that. Yeah, well,
Yeah, that would definitely add a different shading to those moments.
yeah, especially if we did add that. Well, not what we should, but if we projected that into this film as her backstory.
And I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure what the actress's age was when they made this movie, but I believe it falls in the timeline where like it was actively happening at this time.
Oof.
So there was obviously one of I think my favorite part with between the two of them. Excuse me. Even though, again, like I said before, they have similar. I don't know if it's caustic relationship, but they go back, they rib each other back and forth, and there's a moment where she's fed up with John, and she leaves, and then he's like, again, he's a jerk, or he's the greaser, but he has feelings, and hey, I feel like he's more true to he's more not true greaser, but he's more real than I'd say Danny is in Grease. But hey, we're not going to go there anyway.
Hey, cut out these knocks to Grease. What's going on here?
Sorry, man. But no, I like the scene where they also use the scene from in Empire of Dreams, talking about the film, where those I guess girls in the other vehicle show up, and they talk about John's vehicle, and he's like, "I'm a ready Teddy," and then he's like, "Well, get Finn turkey," and throws a water balloon, and it smacks Carol in the face, and then they just like go nuts on them, and they stop the vehicle and perform like arson, or I guess
arson.
Well,
not arson. Well, not arson. Sorry, but that came out wrong. Sorry.
What version did you? Was that the director's cut?
That's
yeah, that's the special edition.
That's
Yeah.
a special edition.
Little CGI flames.
Sorry about that, but they commit what is it? Property damage. There we go. Destruction of property, and by using that, I like that other setup where she has like a foam spray can of like I guess shaving cream with her, and she uses that and destroy puts it all over their windows. And then John thankfully doesn't slash the tires, but just like empties their tires. It could be, people could be like, oh, this is bullying 101 nowadays, but I took it as okay, no, this is a lot of fun.
Wait, Bling 101? What did you say?
Bullying.
Sorry, people would take this as bullying nowadays.
Oh, bullying. Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, but they do it with such a fun spirit. I do think that he shouldn't have aired out the tires. That they maybe took it too far for a kind of fun prank. But I kept being distracted, even though I really like that scene. I kept being distracted by the giant lights right behind them that were spinning around.
Yes.
I was like, what? Maybe I'm missing a cultural reference to the time, but what the hell?
I don't think that's a cultural reference to the time, but I feel like they did it though purposely.
Yes.
To add to the visual of the scene.
Yeah.
That was no accident.
But the artifice of it stood out because I was like, what purpose would that? I mean, that would just blind drivers. That's a hazard right there.
Yep.
Having that right next to the road.
Well, I have seen them in real life. And no, they don't usually put them there on the sidewalk.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, you're right. The only thing I like the scene overall. The only part I don't like about it, it's one of those things where time chronology in the movie like doesn't exist for that minute or so of that sequence. Like there's no way they could have done all the things like during a typical light.
Yeah.
And there's no way he could have, because when there's like a cut by the end of the scene where they're going to drive off, and all tires are completely flattened, like not just a little bit, like completely. So yeah, you have to suspend your disbelief in terms of time and relativity. But other than that, I totally love it, and not in that way, like on the actual street. But me and my friends definitely would prank each other and other friends all the time in high school, and many times I did the gag of either like taking air out of my friend's tire, like while he was parked at school or whatever, or the take off one or two of the spark plug wires, like just disconnect them, so the car will either run rough or it won't run at all. I did that many times.
Glad I didn't have a vehicle in school, or else.
Yeah, glad I didn't have friends doing that. I would have been pissed. But I'm surprised, Isaac, when you started talking about when she gets out of the car, gets mad at him, and is walking down the street. and he picks her up. I thought you were going to mention about, again, the creepy hound dog guys that, I mean,
Oh
she
yeah,
looks like a kid,
I forgot about that. Sorry.
and they're howling out their car window. They're just, yeah, just like stalking her down the street. It's like, dude, I mean, this is gross in most contexts, but she looks like she's a kid,
Yep.
and they're still, yeah, it's like, well, I guess that's just, and she looked like she was scared too, just like, oh crap, don't look at them.
Oh yeah, no, there was some fear in her eyes. So yeah, I forgot. Sorry, I legit forgot about that part. Like obviously, like when she's walking.
Yeah, I know there's no reason to necessarily like the depiction of that or with Debbie earlier in the movie, but there's also no reason for it not to be in the movie
Yeah,
because it just makes complete sense.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying like,
Yeah,
ew,
yeah, yeah.
that's creepy and terrible. But that's what happened as well.
and they do a good job framing it as just gross behavior.
Yeah. So whoever told Lucas to do that, good job. That's yeah.
I don't know. I don't know how to say this next thing because I don't know how to put it into words. But you know, I still see it happen nowadays. Usually late night, like in the bar,
Yeah,
strip bar
I still see it too.
areas of town. But and this is the part I don't know how to phrase or put into words. Is I always find it. Again, I don't know how to say this, but almost comical in a quaint kind of way when I see it nowadays. Now, not the type where it's like aggressive and they're getting like rapey and all that. That's not the version I'm talking about in real life. I mean, I do see that too, but I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about the very stereotypical, hey, what are you doing? Hey, why don't you come over here? Like the very stereotypical baseline, not where they're like literally chasing them around the block or anything like that. Um, but just the quaint version, for some reason, I find it almost, I don't know how to say it, comforting. Not comforting is not the right word, but I find something appealing about it in a nostalgic, innocent kind of way. Again, I'm not talking about the aggressive type or
Innocence due to ignorance kind of
where
way.
it gets like scary. It's just like humans just being humans, and it's tales old as time. And again, they're not crossing any boundaries other than verbal.
Eh.
And yes, the girl's annoyed. I get it, but there's just something
And scared.
very just quaint
Yeah,
about
and
it.
scared. If you talk to most women,
I don't think they're scared. No, they're not scared in this town. They're not scared.
well, if you say so, I don't know if I believe you, but
No. Okay, hold on. There are some girls or women that definitely would be scared or apprehensive put in that situation. Of course, that exists, and that does happen. But I'm not. But this is not. I'm not talking about that because when the context is when you're in this part of town at that time of night, those type of girls are never around. The ones who would be scared or apprehensive. Here, you get the ones who are annoyed and angry, and most of them could totally defend themselves if they needed to. I'm not worried about them.
well, if you say so.
Oh boy, I'm currently stretching my collar right now.
Yeah, see, I definitely don't get any sense of charm from that. So
I wouldn't call it that. Like I said, I don't have the proper words.
I know it's the wrong word. I understand what you mean.
or nostalgia.
I don't think it's nostalgic.
Calling it a nostalgic reaction is like the best I can come up with because I don't know how to describe it.
Well, I definitely don't get any of that. No.
It's kind of like not the same, but kind of how I felt once when I was at work, working with teens and such. And a group of guys were playing video games, and one of the guys just what do you call it? Well, someone had to write a report about it at work because you have to about these kinds of things. Well, one of the friends de-pantsed the other friend while he was standing up playing video games.
Oh, just like what John does to Terry.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, okay. And it was hilarious. I mean, no, it's not nice. I mean, when I saw it with my own eyes, it was not nice. It's disrespectful. But it's like what kids do, and no one's like literally hurt. I don't think the kid felt bullied or anything like that. And it was just funny. And I just remember because we had to go over the report in a meeting, and someone who wasn't there was reading it and like, one boy de-pants the other boy. They're like, what does that mean?
Has the person never been a kid before? Like,
Yeah, that was still definitely common when we were kids.
yeah, no, I mean, it depends on the situation.
Yeah, but I'm not sure what you call it.
Boys will be boys.
Yeah, pantsing.
No, I mean de-pants is not like I don't know what the standard term is.
Pantsing.
Okay, sure.
At least that's what we called it.
Yep.
I never. Yeah, it happened to me numerous times, and girls would even just do it to other girls when I was a kid too.
What the
and
flip?
they seem much more humiliated.
Never happened to me.
But hold on. Hold on. There's a distinction between if it's just the pants or the shorts, or if it's the full Monty, and it's like
Yes, there is a difference there.
Yeah, there's a big
so
difference.
that's
There's
a
a big difference.
huge difference. So this one was just the pants,
Yep.
in the American sense,
See the underwear and all.
not the British sense.
Yeah, if it goes to the other extreme, that's when it's
that's crossing the line. That's not allowed. That's rude. Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the situation for kids where it's like if everybody's getting into it, then like it's fine. But there are instances of hey, if like everybody's pantsing each other, it's fun. But there's consent involved. But then there's obviously some kids who are not comfortable with it, and that's
Okay, so again, why I brought this up was because when I see the situation with the leery guys in real life, in this context, at that time of night, that part of town, I find it quaint, like the de-pantsing thing, in the sense that it's just silly. It's what's always been, what always will be, to some extent, and at the same time, though, understand. I just think, man, those guys are such losers, and I mean that's part of the quaintness and nostalgia at the same time. Like, I can't believe how like backwards these guys are. Like, but yet
corny.
Go on, but yet it continues.
Yeah,
you're laughing at how like look at how what is it, empty-headed these guys are. Look at how like I feel smarter now because I'm not that kind of person.
Or sort of. Well, I'm not necessarily injecting myself in the equation, but also it's just the like, yeah, no matter how much culture and technology advances, like humans don't evolve that quick, I guess.
Oh, sorry, I just have to point this out. So I mentioned earlier that Candy Clark went into B movies late in her career, and we've covered her once previously on the podcast. She was in The Blob. She played the waitress. And I just noticed in that scene, at least I think it was the waitress. Oh, were you going to say something, Eric?
I'm assuming that's the 80s version of The Blob?
The 80s version, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I just saw the scene where Terry was throwing up. And there's this guy sitting next to her, this kind of older guy with glasses. And I was just looking at him like, oh, I kind of recognized him earlier. Why do I know this guy? And I just realized he played the Reverend in The Blob. So it was funny seeing the two of them on screen there.
No, that's cool, and that makes sense, especially because that movie does have that Pleasantville old-timey vibe as well.
Yeah.
Like, it makes sense to cast some of those kind of characters as background characters. Or actors, I meant.
But John, do we have much more for, before we move into some of the bigger stuff with the plot, with his character and the others?
I love his ending with Carol, where he gives her that piece of metal in the end and gives her that.
Yeah, it looks like a piston.
The piston. There you go. I thought it was a what was it? I thought it was a socket for a ratchet set, but I could be wrong on that. Obviously not it was, but I like how he gives her the consensual kiss on the cheek at the end. That was also really nice. And yeah, they may see each other again at some point, and hopefully again just be friends. Like that'd be perfect. Like as like just both are platonic. That'd be really nice, because you know what? Yeah, that's one of the things I liked about it, where it wasn't romantic. And I mean, it's also hard to do it sometimes. Like, I mean, maybe I'm wrong on this, but like it's sometimes hard to do dialogue between two characters who are, well, I guess it's the same thing with guys. Like, how could you can just make it as guys, and not make it feel like romantic. So I just like that this one was purely platonic, and it was, you know, it was well handled.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I love it too, and you know, oftentimes with movies in this genre, I can, you know, see elements of myself in either one or two or multiple characters. And in this movie, it's multiple characters I can relate to for myself. But John's character in particular, I feel a lot of crossover that I can relate to for my own life. And I've had many friend-like relationships with females, very similar to their relationship depicted in the movie, and I still have some of those friends to this day. And so I can very much relate to John and them, and I love it in real life. I love it in movies. And one of the aspects I love about it in real life as well, but as depicted in the movie, is like on the surface, like if you just knew John on the surface, like if we pretend like we're in universe and these are real people, um, you don't expect that kind of seemingly hardened type of guy to have like an inner compassion or heart in the platonic sense. And people generally don't expect that in real life when they meet someone like John on the surface. And so I've had that experience a lot in my life, where people who didn't really know me well looked at me leery eyed, just because of my physical presence or because I don't come off as very friendly oftentimes to strangers. Um, but inside, I know, and I know from life examples that when the rubber meets the road, no pun intended, I have like that inner sense of however you want to describe the bond that is built between John and Carol.
Yeah, the guy who can't get through 10 minutes of Interstellar without breaking into tears, you know.
That's only become a thing in my later years in life. I was never that guy like before the age of 30.
Yeah, that's only because Interstellar didn't exist back then. If you would have seen it back then, it would have changed you.
No, that's not true. That's not true. No, because there's a long list of movies that I just watched like a normal person when I was under the age of 30. And then retroactively, if I see them now, I have like interstellar reactions. A very a simple example that always comes
Oh
to
no,
mind for me is E.T.
I knew you were going there.
That's one of those ones. It was just a regular movie, a regular entertaining movie most of my life. And then as an older person, that movie completely tears me down.
Guy loves James Cameron's Avatar and Titanic to death.
Hey, Titanic's great. Avatar, eh.
I love them both. I wouldn't say I love either to death. And I probably like Avatar a bit more than Titanic. But I definitely like both of them extremely.
No shade, dude. Don't worry. No shade.
Minor shade on Avatar.
Oh my
Um,
god.
no, I'm just kidding. But I wanted to say I liked with John the fact that because we've seen a little bit of him being in this, of being kind of reaching the end of his tether for holding on to having some sort of relevancy. Maybe for this high school class right under him, they all know him and still respect him, but eventually that respect's going to run out, and he's just kind of going to be a loser. So I like giving him this chance with this younger character to still make some sort of impact on the generation below him. I think that's kind of a cool element of his character too.
Yeah. It's not done exactly the same way, but there's a version of this type of older younger relationship, like in Dazed and Confused, which amazes me that Killer hasn't seen it. And we'll probably do that at some point for one of these podcasts, minor hits. But
Yeah, and I'm curious if I'm gonna like it. I'm gonna try to come in with as open arms as I can. But
that I have no idea. I have no idea that you'll like it. I'm not very confident
yeah,
you'll like it, just because um, that movie, in no way is it a remake, but what this movie is for coming out in 73 is exactly what Dazed and Confused was when it came out in 93 or 94, whenever it came out. Like, and I mean, the setting has changed in terms of time period, but both movies like very much serve like the same function. And while the characters aren't exactly the same, you can kind of see, oh, this person is that person from American Graffiti. This person is kind of like that person.
mm,
So they're extremely, extremely similar in many, many ways, including storytelling and characters and depictions and like yeah, they're the basic idea on paper is virtually identical for both movies.
yeah, and I still have a negative connotation when I think of Richard Linklater in comedies, or Linklater in comedies. So that's one of the reasons I've never seen it. I do own it, and I've owned it for
Oh
I
wow.
don't know, like 10 years.
Wow.
But every time I go to pick it up, I'm just like I just don't know if that's something that I have any real interest in seeing. I just want to see it for film archivist reasons.
While it is funny at times, for sure, it is on the comedy scale. It's closer to this than say Fast Times. Um, it's somewhere in the middle in terms of comedy, but it's closer to realism than absurdism.
Closer to Bad News Bears? Is it in that spirit?
I haven't seen Bad News Bears either
It's terrible.
iteration.
The 80s one I used to really like. Not so much a sequel, but yeah, the Linklater version. That was actually the thing that gave me the negative connotation for him. Was that movie? So yeah, I guess let's move over to Kurt finally.
Also, I just love the fact that John comes to Terry's rescue. I don't know if I had already said that, but I like that
Yeah,
that intersects and feels well because I'm not saying
Yeah.
this town is small or anything like that, but I'm glad that right place, right time, and he saved John's hide in that scuffle that was occurring.
yeah, no, it's perfect.
Go ahead, Caleb. The final character out of this ensemble cast, Kurt.
Yeah, and I guess we discussed him a little bit in terms of his character arc. I guess that was pretty much the whole plot summary. um, but I think coming into this, the actor that I knew the most and liked the most coming in was Richard Dreyfuss. And so I was very curious to see how this character is going to play, especially considering the fact that I knew that he was playing a teenager, and this was only was it 2 years before Jaws when this came out?
I am like that is the biggest thing, man. I kept saying like he was in Jaws, and I'm like,
Yeah, that is crazy.
what kind of de-aging did they do to him? Because like he does not look like he does in Jaws.
Or aging for Jaws.
Yeah, yeah. What kind of aging happened?
In a way, I think that makes more sense because like he looks the same as he does in Jaws. Well, maybe this is wrong on me, but he looks the same as he does in Jaws when he's in 2010.
He's in 2010.
I believe so. Unless I'm
I
wrong on
mean, you
that.
could be right. I don't remember. It's been ages since I've seen
I
it.
think he's
Me
in that.
too.
Are you thinking of Rob Schneider by chance? Because Rob Schneider's obviously in Jaws and in 2010.
Maybe. Well, actually, yeah, he's in both, but I think Dreyfuss is in there. I think they paired him up with Schneider again.
I will grab my DVD. It's right next to me, and I'll take a look. Just
Go
out of
right
curiosity.
Yeah,
Please, yeah, fact check me. I'm pretty sure that is the case.
I have no idea. I just don't, and I haven't seen 2010 in ages. So
If he is in it, it's not listed in the main cast here.
Okay.
Yeah, you may be getting it confused with Roy Scheider.
I said Rob Schneider. I meant wait, is it Roy Schneider?
Roy Scheider.
Yeah, because you said Rob. I'm like, I don't think Rob Schneider was in that.
Right. I was naming the SNL actor
Yep.
unintentionally.
But yeah, so I was curious, like how the hell are they gonna pull this off? Is he gonna look like he's like 36 years old playing a teenager?
Oh, that's so funny.
He does look too old, but I think he has got a good spirit for the role, and so I very quickly just kind of lose that baggage.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I mean, none of the actors look 18 except for maybe
Yeah.
Carol, who looks younger than 18. But yeah, but no, I think he's perfectly fine. I mean, age wise, because you could argue that at times Terry looks a bit older than he should be. But not so much that it would take me out of the movie or anything like that.
Yeah, and it was mainly just from knowing he's easily the one I know the most, Richard Dreyfuss. So that was why I had a little bit more baggage with him. But no, I think he's got a great energy, and I like that he is essentially the solo act. Everyone else is paired up. Everyone's kind of in their little doubles routine.
Well, to a degree, he's a solo act because he is paired up with people, but not people who we really, what's the word, sympathize with, I guess.
Yeah, and he's sort of transient. He moves to different doubles, and then he has his pairings for those little areas. But for the most part, it's just him, which I like. It gives a bit of a different flavor for the dynamics. It makes him stand out a little bit more.
It certainly does that, and I'm sure by design, but similar, not exactly the same, but similar to how I like the John Carroll relationship as it progresses during the movie.
Mm-hmm.
I do like Kurt's arc with the Pharaohs. And I had forgotten about that whole aspect when I was watching the movie today, so I didn't know where it was going to go. So when I was watching it today, like the Pharaohs really annoyed me at first. but once it develops the way it does in the movie, I like it. I like it a lot.
Isaac?
Um, the pharaohs being like more greasy or more greasers than John is. Funny enough, they still came across as like a little bit more. I'll say laid back, but I guess they could have been more worse. Or at least their depictions could have been. But I found them pretty charming. I like how kind of reasonable, I guess they were, where they didn't immediately, put Kurt's head to the curbside and start beating him up. I'm
Oh
kind of
no.
impressed by that. Maybe I just too much into violence. I don't know.
Yes, maybe think of American History X. Oof.
But they were like, all right, we either drag you along like concrete behind the vehicle, or you stay with us for the entire evening and as we go about our business, being delinquents. And that actually kind of turns almost like both encounters that he has with them when they go to the arcade or whatever it is, and then to play the prank or whatever on the cops. That actually works out in his favor. Maybe the first one more than the second, because he gets to see those. I guess see some old familiar faces of, I guess, people he worked with or worked under.
Yeah, and I like seeing the side of the town that he spends the time in it. I feel like the other groups, even though we see different parts of the town, we don't really get to live in it in the same way. So I appreciate that. I like the interaction with the radio DJ because we constantly hear him throughout the whole picture. I like how that fits in. I think that's cool.
The Wolfman.
Yeah, that aspect of the film feels very Tarantino-esque.
Tarantino-esque. How so?
Well, on the one hand, just kind of the way Tarantino, likes to infuse his films with music, or popular, off the beaten path type of music, but especially Reservoir Dogs in particular, where the DJ, we don't ever see him on screen, but is like a constant character in the background of the movie.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. Yeah, some like the Warriors does something similar as well. Yeah, and I I don't know how to frame this because it's been so long since I've seen The Graduate, but I kept thinking of that movie as well when thinking of Kurt's plot, and both of them have that kind of.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, you're absolutely right. I've seen that more recently, but you get a combo of characteristics from Dustin Hoffman in The Graduate. I can't remember his character's name, but you get shades of him in both Kurt and in Steve.
Yeah, and they carry a kind of spirit of the hippie movement without being hippies. Something about that kind of
Yes.
yeah, I like quite a bit.
Yeah, you're right. You're totally right. Well, he's definitely the more preppy out of the characters in this movie. There's no question about that.
Mhm.
Yeah, like he'd go to Yale or someplace like that.
Yeah, or he lived the more what was more considered like the traditional path of a young man in the 50s or early 60s. Um, whereas the others are more kind of like they could more go with the 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 wind of current culture. He's like the one that's most on the traditional path, quote unquote.
Yeah, and I always like stories that are about a place as much as they are about just a character's plot. Something like Vamp, if anyone's seen that kind of silly 80s movie. It's all about exploring this one little area, and I think that's super cool. There's one Scorsese movie I'm thinking of that does that too that I really like, but I can't remember at the moment. So I feel like that makes this aspect feel more unique, and I wish maybe we got some more interesting little characters along the way. Maybe if we'd cut out that whole Steve plot, we could have got some more of that going on. Maybe that's unfair, but I feel like if anything in this movie feels like it could almost stand on its own. I feel like they could have beefed up this side of it, and I would have really enjoyed this Richard Dreyfuss falling in love with his town that he's about to leave story.
I mean, I would have liked that too if there was more focus on him, but that would have been a different movie.
Yes.
Because I also like this movie though too, but I could see an alternate, a different movie that goes that direction, and I could see enjoying that too.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just yeah, it's a weird compliment to say that this part I feel is good enough that it could be in a different movie.
Yeah, I mean, it would be something like, in my mind, like the original Karate Kid, where it's more focused on a central character, and his specific coming of age rather than an ensemble piece.
Yeah, but just that kind of movie just works for me in general, and I don't know what else to say, but I do think even though Kurt isn't my favorite character out of the group, his whole story arc is probably my favorite part of the movie, even though he is my favorite character.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I did feel bad during the arcade or whatever you wanted to call it scene. Um, just how the owner, proprietors, whatever, are just being really nice to him and talking to him in the back while the guys are like stealing the change. Like that just made me
Yeah,
feel kind of bad.
me too. I didn't really like that. I was like, hey, come on.
Yeah, I was almost hoping the guys, the pharaohs, just wouldn't steal anything at all, and would just kind of leave. So yeah, that I guess if I felt uncomfortable at some point, maybe it was that as well, mildly, but
Yeah.
I get it. Um, Obviously, a big part of Kurt's arc is him having this obsession or fixation on of this uh, girl or woman he saw driving this white T-bird, and he barely got kind of a look at her. She says something to him that is inaudible or unintelligible, and
Hmm.
that's kind of one of his focuses throughout the rest of the night. Um, do you guys know who played the woman who was driving the T-bird?
Oh, interesting. No, I don't.
Nope.
And I think the same actress did the voice on the telephone later because it sounded like her. I didn't verify it, but it sounded like her. It's actually Suzanne Summers.
Interesting.
Yeah, who just passed. Who just passed like a week ago.
Rip Suzanne Summers.
For anyone my age or older, she was one of the super hottie babes of the '70s, later '70s, and she was unknown at this point. But by the end of the '70s and into the early '80s, she was considered one of the hottest babes on TV at the time.
Yeah, I'm trying to think where I know her from, but I definitely recognize the name.
She was mostly initially known for Three's Company, famously, but people a bit younger than me might know her better in what is that show called? It was a spinoff of Family Matters. Step by Step. Is that what it was called?
I know the show you mean. I never watched it, so I can't remember what that is. But
Yeah. So for people a little bit younger than me, she became popular for that role in that show because that show was not as popular as Family Matters, but it was up there in popularity at the time.
oh, I know why I know her, and I know why I recognize the name. She played a version of herself in Serial Mom. She was going to play the role of the serial mom in the movie that they were going to make of it.
Oh.
Yeah,
Oh.
and she has a really funny scene in that movie.
Oh, she was also famous in the late '80s, early '90s for the infomercial that was big in those days for the Thigh Master,
Oh,
and she was like very known as like the spokesperson for that product and infomercial. Again, anyone my age or older, like everyone knows, like you can't unknow these things or not know these things because they're so embedded in the zeitgeist.
yeah, but even though that relationship dynamic, if you want to call it that, is kind of shallow, I like it as just kind of a metaphor with him falling in love with this town that he's probably for all these years just been looking forward to getting out of this kind of small little area because they all kind of have that to some degree. Maybe even John, although I'm not quite sure. But for this night when he's deciding whether he's going to stay or go, yeah, kind of having that, seeing that hidden beauty in it again, I think that's really much more exciting than just the idea of him pursuing this mysterious woman. So
I totally agree. Totally agree.
I mean, yeah, she's the represent. I think you probably said this. Yeah, sorry if you repeating you, but like she's the
okay.
representation of the town itself. Like she's what he needs, metaphorically speaking. But yeah, it's weird because, like I said, it was earlier. Between him and Steve, they're contrasting each other, where he doesn't want to leave, but he ends up leaving, and then it's the reverse for Steve. So, I guess maybe there's something for him to look forward to when he does return.
Yeah.
Even though he already has all this stuff, I also wonder when he does return, is he going to get initiated to the pharaohs, or is he going to get like attacked by them for like saying, "Hey, you're supposed to do like this blood ritual or whatever
There
they
you
said
go.
they were gonna do." So we're gonna drag you along the concrete.
Oh no, more concrete stuff.
I don't know. Yeah, always about the concrete.
But I thought that that the scene with the Wolfman again, we mentioned that a little bit. I really like that too, just the vibe and the Wolfman himself being kind of this mystery as well, or the guy pretending that it's not him. I think that that stuff all has a just such a I was gonna say quaint again, but quaint almost seems I don't know. It almost seems like you're putting it down or something, being condescending towards it. But it just had it made me wish for the heyday of the DJs again.
Charming, I suppose.
Yeah, charming, sure.
That doesn't sound as pretentious or like you're throwing shit at it. No, yeah, he was a cool guy. He was a rad kind of dude. And also very open to the fact that it's late at night, doesn't lock his doors. Maybe this is just where we live, and just anybody can cruise in there at different time. And just helps this guy out. Doesn't say like, "Hey, you can't be in here." He's he's that guy who's I guess a better therapist, radio therapist than Fraser Crane himself. But no, in this case, yeah, he lets him in, and very open kind of guy, kind of very laid back. That's the kind of guy we need more of. Like he's the nice kind of he's the OG podcaster. Let's put it that way. So yeah, he was a decent fellow, and I like he's always trying to be like, "Hey man, hey, this is a cliche nowadays, but yeah, hey, my freezer just broke. Oh, how convenient. I need to get rid of all of these popsicles." It's like, yeah, that's fair. Or just like all frozen food or whatever's in there.
Yeah, and it was cool because I guess he'd been such a pervasive element in the town itself. They built up all these myths around him that he's always flying over the town, or maybe the world in a plane, and recording from up there, and then we get this more demystified view, but there's still that cool air of mystery to it. I think all that stuff was well handled.
Well, even the reveal and what it actually is still pretty is honest. I
Yeah,
like it how down to earth it is, and it doesn't take away from the myth itself. It's just between all these people, and he got to like Kurt himself got to witness just for a brief second out of the corner of his eye, he got to see who the Wolfman really is.
yeah,
And I like that. I felt it was just honest, and it was a feel good moment.
yeah. I agree. Yeah,
Yeah, I agree with everything you guys said, and just give me 30 minutes on this subject. No, when Caleb mentioned something about old timey, like the days of disc jockeys and whatnot being big on the radio, I know I was just curious. I wonder what Steve would think about this character or this part of the movie, only because I recently learned that I guess one of Steve's all-time favorite sitcoms is WKRP in Cincinnati, which is not something I've watched a lot of, but
me neither.
but I watched enough that I get the premise there, and they kind of borrow that premise to an extent, like in that '70s show as well, like the WKRP aspect, a little bit in some seasons of that '70s show. But anyway, I think whatever that book was, I couldn't remember the name of when we were talking about THX, about hero arcs. I think part of the reason the Wolfman character exists in the movie or in the screenplay is because, again, to an extent, we're following that book's basic principles and outlines. And he is very much the mentor / elder character who just steps in at one point just to assist our main protagonist in finding his direction. And I think it's all very well done.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, pretty perfect in the context of the movie. And it reminded me of the other Tarantino movie I was reminded of as it pertained to the setting and the inclusion of music. But another movie I thought of, even aside from this, as I was watching this today, was Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Just because, even though I wasn't alive at that time, it feels like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood captures 1969 so well, and it's another integral part of like the texture of that movie, of hearing the radio frequently through the movie and hearing real archival commercials being played on the radio in the movie. Um, so yeah, I was just kind of thinking of that movie just in terms of capturing a period really well. That was in the back of my mind watching this.
And just to go through I've only got 4 notes left. One of them was something we touched on a little bit, but I like the fact that this movie just constantly has music playing throughout almost the whole runtime. And I think they, even though it's not necessarily music that I would listen to in my own time, this genre or this period of music isn't always something that I reach for. I think they made a lot of good choices, and it just I really like the vibe that gave the movie.
Yeah, so for me, like, I mean, honestly, I think this movie set off the trend that would last for a long time, which was to have that almost fetishistic nostalgia for the rock and roll, mostly 1950s vibe. I think it kicked off with this. You know, it gained even more momentum when Grease came around. And so you guys don't remember it like I do because it wasn't just in popular media where things that related back to the 50s or rock and roll times. Like we've discussed before how the 80s had that kind of revival, you know, with Stranger Things and many other things in recent times. Well, that started with this movie and it lasted, I would say, almost all the way through the end of the 80s. That there was always like this kind of obsession with those times. And so for me, I got really hooked into the obsession myself when I saw La Bamba. I think that was 87. And because of that movie and just the way things were back then, I got really into rock and roll and standards of that time. And then even though it was later when I first saw this movie, at the time I was like, oh yeah, I love this. I love hearing all this rock and roll music in this movie. Love it. Sets the scene so well. Now, as an older person now and being more familiar with time periods, it is a little bit weird to me that a lot of those songs would have been out of date in 1962. I mean, still everyone would know them because so many of them are so iconic, and of course you would still hear them. I am assuming in 1962. It's just you would think you would hear more music that was from like 61 or 62, and there's not much. The only one that really hits the time right would be like the Beach Boys song we hear at some point. That would be current for the movie, but all the other songs would have been like 4, 5, 6 years old in some cases. And again, it's not like that wouldn't happen. It's just it was so heavy with like the older music. That's not really a knock. That's just like a weird obsessive compulsive thing I have now as an adult in noticing details.
Yeah, and the only radio station that we hear them playing is Wolfman's. So maybe that was just what he played.
That's true.
If you listen to maybe some other stations.
That's true. That's true. But I guess that's also part of the reason why I assumed this movie was in the 50s when I first saw it. Because it definitely gives that more 50s vibe. But also, if they did lean into what was popular at the time in terms of rock and roll, it'd be a lot more of this crooner boy pop idol kind of rock, and that wouldn't be as interesting if they had leaned into that type of rock and roll.
Different tone. Yeah, I know what you mean. I think the other option, I think the other explanation is they could only maybe get those guys, or those songs were easier to get the rights for than what was happening during '62. Potentially, I don't know that for sure, but yeah, good on you for taking my thoughts there, Eric. About I didn't even think about that. I mean, I sort of did think about toxic nostalgia, but
what?
I don't know this one. Well, yeah, like toxic nostalgia. That's like that. Stranger Things is that.
Oh, that's what you meant.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Well, you meant.
I thought you were calling back to the girls walking on the side of the road. I thought you were calling back to that.
Oh no, but no. Well,
no, yeah,
different thing. It's fun. You do mention that, yeah. That the people were obsessed with the 50s back in the 80s. I mean, that's what Back to the Future Part 1 is all about, for crying out loud. And people think it's all about the DeLorean in the 80s. It's like, no, it's all about like the 50s period, which is, going back to this.
Totally. Like, yeah, my favorite car, like from elementary through middle school, was a '57 Chevy. Like, it was crazy. And what's really crazy is, so in my elementary school, um, you know, kids used to do recess a lot more in school back in the day. They kind of got rid of recess as I understood it, like in the '90s. But anyway, I was still in the days of when we had a lot of recess. And um, when we were out in the playground at my elementary school, just across the street from the schoolyard, this house had like a 55, 56 or something Chevrolet or Ford. And, we all saw it like in school and we always thought it was so cool. Um, it's been 30 plus years since then. And occasionally I'll drive down that street. The same car is still parked in the same place today.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
The same 55, 56, whatever it is, still with the same color paint job, two-tone, like baby blue and white. It's still there. And it blows my mind. But anyway. But yeah, that was a huge, like fetish that people just had in general of the cars and the music and the vibe. And it's crazy how long that lasted. I mean, from almost 20 years.
I will say, maybe Caleb already mentioned this, but yeah, as he said, with the score being very persistent the score itself is just all these songs, and I really like that. It's even if they're in the background and they may have some high energy to them or maybe mid energy, I still really like it how it does replace the score. I think that's this is a good example of licensed songs being part of the score. So I really did like, and I guess it doesn't feel like Tarantino took this from Lucas. I assume that was just Tarantino himself, but he was doing Tarantino before Tarantino, but not in the same way. Of course, it was two different artists doing the same thing but differently. So because he would use those for various parts of the movie and very like specific aspects of it, whereas this it's just to fill, like, I guess, time in, and I guess to beat background noise in a good way.
Yeah
and to direct mood. I feel like a lot of that, like we get the Black Mirror, the famous Black Mirror song in this, when they play that for the kind of the love scene moment, and then when they're driving around we get really like more propulsive kind of music. I think it's great for setting that tone in the audience.
Yeah, and I can't think of an earlier example, excluding outright musicals. I can't think of an earlier example that did it like this, in the way that, like, I think this is the progenitor of this technique that will persist, which I'll quickly go through in a second. But because other teen movies, like of the 60s and the 70s, usually, at least from what I've seen, they usually just used like this generic background rock and roll or whatever is popular at the time music. It's usually something that it's just like a sound alike, and it's usually I couldn't stop talking about it on the Best Picture podcast because there was a scene like this in Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, where this delivery boy is listening to quote unquote popular music in 1967, and it's the stereotypical like like something like that is what you hear in a lot of movies when they include quote unquote current pop music in the 60s and 70s. But like this movie, I think it sets the template like for the genre and a bit for the rom-com genre that would come later, because this obviously translated heavily into the 80s teen movies, where obviously that was an essential part of that genre, was to include popular songs, some you knew and some that were made to tie in with the movie. That was like part of the whole marketing dynamic for all these types of movies in the 80s and to a degree bleeding into the 90s. And and it's crazy to see the evolution of it if you're into this genre like I am, because like the newest iteration would have been like the way they started doing it with the series The OC, and that kind of set the tone for the next 10 or so years after The OC. And when you think of movies like Garden State or 500 Days of Summer, like again, this is the earliest example I could think of kind of doing this technique, and it's crazy how it's translated through the decades now.
Yeah, I was gonna say actually, just yesterday, as part of my October Halloween movies, I watched a 1984 film called Night of the Comet, and it also has a big part of the movie revolving around a radio station, and that's another one where it's just constant music playing in just about every scene. A great selection of music. I think that soundtrack is just awesome. That movie in general, an underrated cult classic from the 80s, Night of the Comet.
Um, Heard of it, haven't seen it, but one I consider a little bit of a hidden gem in this genre. I mean, especially for me, who's a guy who loves these kind of movies, I had never seen a Valley Girl until a year ago, approximately. And Valley Girl is very much in the vein of this style of movie, but it's like it came out around the same time as Fast Times at Ridgemont High, but Fast Times at Ridgemont High is like the more mainstream absurdist comedy, whereas
Yeah.
Valley Girl is like the alternative version of that movie. And the score is so amazing because it's totally 1982 hits, but it's the alternative hits, not the fully mainstream hits. And so I absolutely adore that soundtrack, and the movie itself. They made a modern musical version of it. It's okay, but the original is the best. And of course, young what's his name? Coppola's cousin or nephew.
No, Nick Cage.
Nicolas Cage.
Nicolas Cage, obviously, that's like his first real starring role, and that's another good reason to watch Valley Girl if someone hasn't seen it.
Oh, and just since you mentioned Coppola, I will go into one of my other notes that I thought was very odd that I'd never heard about this. I didn't realize that after THX 1138, one of the next projects that George Lucas was working on, and he was actually working on it before he ever did THX, was Apocalypse Now. There was like a 4-year span where that was going to be his next feature after THX. And it just, I guess, fell apart just before he went on to direct that movie. But they were, yeah, he was flying around. He was involved with writing it. I thought that was. Could you imagine if George Lucas directed Apocalypse Now? That's so strange to think.
Honestly, I don't think it would be that different.
Uh,
Even though that's obviously Coppola's movie, Apocalypse Now, that something about the way it was made and constructed and the way it comes off when you watch it. I haven't seen it in many years, but from my recollections, the style of it, of its presentation, feels relatable to me to this movie and THX.
huh. I don't see it, but
Which is a bit different than, let's say, how the Coppola Godfather films feel. That's different. Like I feel there's more shared stylistic DNA with Apocalypse Now and these two Lucas movies than, like, again, Godfather, and a lot of crossover actors as well from this Lucas stuff and Apocalypse Now,
yeah.
because obviously Robert Duvall and Harrison Ford. And what's weird also about Apocalypse Now, and this franchise, is that the sequel to this movie, which was not directed, produced, or written by George Lucas, but it was released by Lucasfilm Limited. That movie came out, I think, almost the same time as Apocalypse Now, and that was bad timing. Bad timing. And there was another significant movie I can't think of that also came out at the same time. And between Apocalypse Now and whatever the other movie was, that was a terrible time to release more American Graffiti, I think is what it's called.
Was it Corvette Summer? I think that was 79.
No, not Corvette Summer. I mean, that did come around that time. Well, this is 79 that we're talking about.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'll figure it out. It wasn't Corvette Summer. But when you all talked about the car in THX and how you kind of thought it was cool, the car reminded me of the car in Corvette Summer, because in both cases, they're obviously based upon real cars, but they have all these weird appendages added to them. And
Mm-hmm.
so I was going to bring up Corvette Summer last time.
Yeah, and I always, having heard of these two movies for so long, American Graffiti and Corvette Summer, I always associated them in my mind. But for whatever reason, I had more of a call to check out Corvette Summer. So I saw that, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, I could see that. I haven't seen Corvette Summer in a million years, but and it almost should be part of this podcast series.
Ah, it doesn't have enough connection.
Well, it's still. I mean, what? It's probably
No Lucas connection, really.
no Lucas, but certainly Mark Hamill. Like it's kind of his most notable work. I mean, outside of voice acting and whatnot,
Yeah, I guess that's fair.
on screen, it's like kind of his most notable work, aside from Star Wars. And I always saw it all the time. I used to play it on TV all the time, Corvette Summer, and it was actually entertaining in a way. But it's also a teen coming of age movie. Just it's more in the typical late '70s vein than something like this.
Yeah, it's a bit weirder.
Yeah, for sure. I need to find out what else came out. The other big movie around the time Apocalypse Now came out.
Well, I've only got 2 notes left, and I guess I'll do that while you're doing this. I'm very curious what you guys think about this. It's only a very minor moment, but they focus on it enough that it stood out for me. So we get Mr. Wolf. He's having a conversation with I believe it was Kurt, and Kurt was being like, oh, I don't know if I want to go away to college, and this Mr. Wolf, he was the, I guess, the dance monitor at that dance they go to, and he's kind of drilling into him like, don't be
Oh,
stupid, go to college. And then all of a sudden this woman, or this girl I should say, shows up, this high school student, and she's like, oh, I need to talk to you. And he gets this kind of nervous look, and he hurriedly shoos Kurt away. And then they go and talk in the corner, and they look like they're having quite the heated or intimate conversation. And Kurt just kind of looks at them for a moment, then walks away. And I was like, just like, that's kind of an interesting moment to just throw in there, just for, I guess, shits and giggles or something.
no. Well, I don't know if it's shits and giggles. Oh, well, maybe a little bit it is. But I totally agree. I mean, it is an interesting moment to put in the movie. And I'm so glad you brought it up because I at least wanted to touch on this scene at the very least, and I would have forgotten. Is that all you have to say about the scene?
If you guys got more, go ahead. I don't have too much to say about it, but it definitely stood out.
So let me ask Isaac. It is obvious, right, what's going on in that scene? Or am I crazy?
It certainly seems obvious, yeah.
What's the song again by the Police? Don't stand so close to me. There we go. Yes, it is. That is the scene.
I love that song. I love that song.
I'm not like sick of it, but I do believe it's overplayed, but not in a bad way.
Oh, not here.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, obviously, there's nothing. I don't know if there's any. That's a gag or if that's a reference to something that happens. I was like, if there was some. I don't know, just some like interloping or something like that out of set or something like that between like two people George Lucas knew or so. I don't know. But like, obviously, yeah, it's an older gentleman, like who's oh yeah, I went to Vermont, and then he ends up here for one semester, and then he's seeing this student. Like maybe it's just he's the guy that has high class, and here he is having an affair, or not an affair, but he's got a relationship with the students, which can be seen as kind of like a little bit not great. What's your read on that there, Eric?
I guess I did kind of put it in my notes to be like, I wrote loss of innocence, which is kind of vague. I don't know why I put it that way, but I was like, I guess I was thinking maybe like, here he is, Kurt, he's coming to the end of his high school experience, and maybe this teacher, Mr. Wolf, someone who respects him, and maybe he respected, now that he's coming to this this older age, now he's seeing through the cracks and like, oh, even people that I respect are maybe doing things that are not exactly appropriate.
There you go.
So I wondered if that was just a part of the journey there, but yeah, I didn't really have much more to say for it.
Yeah. What you just said is is in my second part reaction to this particular scene.
Sure.
Because the first obvious thing is like the not so hidden subtext. Um, kind of like, again, when a character says, "Oh, it sucks being at home. I hate my dad." We all know what that means. Like Jenny and Forrest Gump or something. Um, and then this scene, it's very obvious what's going on, like an inappropriate relationship with a teacher and a student. So on the one hand, I like its inclusion just because it further adds to the texture of real life and what is. But yeah, what's more significant is kind of like what you were talking about, Caleb, um, which I totally get a sense of as well, which is, yeah, this is a person he looks up to as a mentor, um, and it's it's an interesting thing just to think about, like with mentors in general, um, because you can have a good mentor even if they don't walk the walk, that they talk. And like how they say, like just because a doctor is a smoker himself doesn't mean he can recommend to you not to smoke. I think that makes sense. Doesn't necessarily make him a hypocrite, but I think it's more interesting in the movie, this dynamic, in the sense that, yeah, this is someone he looked up to, someone who has been like a guide to him throughout high school life, etc. But at the same time, it makes it seem like when a person is giving you advice and is in that type of um, role or relationship with you, that when you can see like a hint into like their flaws, their character flaws, it can also instill a sense of, I don't know, maybe everything you're saying is just bullshit. Like
Yeah.
who knows? Like maybe you're like, not to invoke any type of religious connotation, but like a false prophet or something. Those aren't the words I'm really going for, but you know what I mean. Um, but yeah, because maybe a lot of things people say, because he already kind of, because the concept of imposter syndrome. I don't know how much you guys have felt that in your own lives. I've certainly had a lot of doses of it at times,
Me too.
where people will tell you stuff and in your head you're just like, yeah, okay. Or like sometimes people will compliment you like, man, you're doing so good and look what you've accomplished and you got all your shit together. I wish I had my shit together the way you do. And obviously John experiences this in the movies too, but in your head you're like, you have no idea how fucked up I am.
Yeah.
Like, you know.
You're talking about me. Thank you very much.
And so yeah, so I think it's kind of a like, it's a moment for him to reflect, and not just on that guy in particular, but just on all these people who are blowing smoke up his behind. Like maybe this is all just talk and none of it is really real. I mean, what's interesting is that this fake mentor, if we'll call him that, like he's trying to be real, and I mean with his advice and his compliments, he's trying to be sincere, um, but it doesn't you don't really think Kurt takes much of whatever he says to heart, which is ironic when juxtaposed against the Wolfman, weirdly similar name.
Yeah.
um, that Wolfman actually presents his advice in a um, insincere, in the sense that there's the subterfuge of, I'm not really the Wolfman, he's somebody else, I'm just a guy here who does this job and he gives me the tapes and I just put in the tapes. And so it's weird that he's kind of set up as a less honest character in a way, with his presentation. Yet I think maybe there's a another metaphor going on there when he's talking about himself almost like in the third person, because he's not trying to shine on Kurt. He's not trying to present like this false saccharine way of espousing wisdom or advice. He's trying to self-deprecate himself and then just deliver the message without like the bells and whistles. And the metaphor I just thought of with the tapes, that he says, oh, he puts down some things and I just put the tape in and I just play it. That's another way of almost kind of saying, not to sound religious again, but I'm just like a vessel for a message. So in a way, it's almost similar to Mr. Wolf, like, or like I was talking about the smoking doctor who tells you not to smoke. Hey man, I'm just the messenger. This is not necessarily my wisdom. I just put in the right tape and it goes out. But you know, see what I'm saying? Like, I don't know if metaphor is even the right word, but there's something poetic about the setup of that, where it's like, hey man, I'm just giving the message. That doesn't mean I've done the right thing. So it's almost a way of validating the knowledge that you're passing on, um, even if it doesn't seem like you'd be like the best source for such knowledge or wisdom. Oh my god, does that make sense?
Yeah.
I wish I had thought of all that, because that's amazing stuff, man.
Okay, don't blow smoke up my ass, but
Yeah, I'm sorry, man. Sorry, that was just a really good observation, because, like, yeah, I didn't even realize. Like, yeah, I think you are onto something there.
Yep. Yep. I agree.
I can't
I don't
really.
have much more to say, but
Yeah, I don't know if we have anything to add, Eric, because you pretty much said it all. So it's like, yeah, no, we
I
agree.
know I had the idea in my head. It just felt clumsy for me, like to try to explain it. But yeah, I'm glad you got what I was going for.
I think it's visual metaphor, analogy, whatever you want. I mean, maybe you're right, but like, yeah, no, I think it makes sense. I can see it.
I did keep glancing at my notes the whole time we were talking. I kept looking at the Mr. Wolf and the Wolfman. I was like, why did they put those two names that's so similar? But yeah, no, that's interesting.
Yeah, yeah, and obviously, in the movie, again, Kurt doesn't really hold much value in what Mr. Wolf is saying, but it definitely seems like he takes to heart things that come from the Wolf Man.
Yeah.
The other Wolfman, though.
Yeah.
And there's only one more thing in my notes, and I'm curious what you guys are going to say about this. This is a trope that I hate, and comedies frequently do this for reasons that I'll never understand. It's so cheap and adds nothing, I think. And that is the little title card at the end to show where all these characters went in the next, I don't know, decade or so, or a couple of years.
John Milner was killed by a drunk driver in December 1964. Terry Fields was reported missing in action near Anlock in December 1965. Steve Bolander is an insurance agent in Modesto, California, and Kurt Henderson is a writer living in Canada.
No, generally, I like when they do this in movies. They
Oh,
do it
no.
in different. Hold on, they do it in different kinds of ways in different movies. I love the classic '80s, like in Platoon, at the end where they just show all the characters like having moments like without audio, where they're just kind of mugging
That's
the
different.
camera. They
That's
do it like in
different.
Top Gun. I know. I'm saying that's a different version of conveying something at the end. I'm a big fan of that. Obviously, there's a lot of based on true stories and other things where they just have like a text um, at the end
That's different too.
without images. I'm just saying it's all in the same vein.
No, I.
I think I think it's in the same vein. And then a version of this, which I like a lot better, but it's done differently, is at the end of Stand By Me. It's not done like on screen with visuals or text. It's just the narrator who's been narrating like the whole movie. It's just his voice like saying what happened to all his buddies. I think that one is the best execution of this, of saying like what happened with the characters, because the way it's done here in particular, that happens sometimes, like use this method like in comedy movies,
Yes.
stupid comedy movies, and it works in those movies, I guess. Well,
Ugh.
certainly better than it works in this movie. um, so yeah, the way they chose to present it in this movie, the information is fine, whatever, but the way it's done on screen is not good, and it feels really amateurish in execution compared to everything else we've seen before this in the movie. Like it almost seems like a whole different, like an ad studio produced it, who wasn't part of like the actual core filmmakers of the movie.
Yeah, like a cheap TV movie or something.
Yeah, because a little bit reminded me of the Brady Bunch, or just when you see a trailer for a movie from the 70s or 60s and it's obviously just made for marketing. It's not, the filmmaker. It's just, yeah. So yeah, the presentation not good, um, awkwardly inserted and presented. But if they just would have delivered the information in a different way, again, like Stand by Me or something, that would have been a lot better. But yeah,
Ah, most of the reason I strongly dislike this gimmick is I never feel like it's just like, okay, you just put that there. This information doesn't add anything to the characters, it doesn't make me walk away thinking about this. I forget about the title cards almost immediately, and I just think about the story that was given, not this weird little weird little, I don't know what to call it at the end. It's just so strange. I don't see how it has any value.
I think the reason filmmakers do it, I think, or like in this case, I think what the idea is of including something like this is to say not only for people who grew up in this generation, because of course George Lucas made this a lot based upon like his own growing up in Southern California, coming of age. It's not just for people of Lucas's generation, but also I think a little bit for the generation that comes just after. Um, so yeah, we're obviously talking about baby boomers and then Gen Xers. Um, I think it's to say, hey, to all of us who are boomers, like we all have different lives now as adults, but remember how we kind of had these things in common when we were younger, but we all went our separate ways, so to speak, in life. And then the same thing for Gen Xers to look at the older people, like the way you look at your parents or your uncles and aunts or adults in your neighborhood or whatever, your teachers, and you go, wow, you were cool once, or you did these kind of youthful things that I do now as a young Gen Xer. But then you just, yeah, some went to war, some were randomly killed, and some just had regular, quote unquote, normal lives or whatever. Um, I think that's the whole purpose. Again, I don't agree with the execution in this movie, but I think that's what they're going for.
Yeah, well, I won't belabor it. I've said my piece. I think it's just a cheap convention, and I don't think I don't think anyone walks away remembering it. Maybe it has a very brief effect for like half a second, but once people are walking to the theater, they're thinking about the movie. They're not thinking about that stupid little tag at the end.
Again, I not done well here, but if it's done right, I do like it when it's done right. And people, I've seen memes about Stand By Me now, how um, the way they describe the futures of the boys when they grow up in the movie, um, to some degree mirrors what happened to the actual actors when they grew up. Because you had the same thing where like the one was killed at a young age or died at a young age. One went a bit nuts, and the other ones just kind of turned out kind of normal.
Well, yeah, I didn't want to say this because I didn't want to belabor this again for too long, but I do discount the Stand By Me as well because that has its whole kind of wraparound narrator. It's an actual part of the story, the fact that it takes place years later. It's not just a tagged on.
Oh yeah, of course. Yes, of course. It would be weird if no. Again, yeah, that's because it's done correctly. I'm not saying it would be good if a narrator just came in this movie because obviously that wouldn't make any sense either. Yeah, it has to be constructed right
Yeah.
for the movie at hand. Certainly.
Yeah, my only point is I feel like the things you're talking about don't necessarily relate to the convention that I'm complaining about. They're separate.
I get it. Oh, and the other movie that came out at the same time as the sequel was Life of Brian. Um, so
Oh,
yeah, Life and Brian and Apocalypse Now like destroyed the sequel of this movie at the box office.
fair enough.
It still turned a modest profit because it was such a low budget movie to begin with, the sequel, but still it was like certainly didn't have like the payoff that this movie had when it came out. And I'll only bring it up because again, no one really cares too much about the sequel. I watched more than half of it today. I hadn't seen it in forever. It's not a great movie. It's not a terrible movie. Like it's watchable. Definitely has a lot of issues though. But one thing I found interesting because I had forgotten about the little denouement or whatever you want to call it at the end of this movie, because the sequel takes place over the span of 1964 to 1967. They definitely, I wouldn't say constrained, but they definitely keep it canon by, even though they go by those different year time periods in the sequel, they definitely maneuver so that they don't discount the little messages at the end of this movie, if you know what I mean.
Oh wow. Okay.
The only sad thing about the sequel is that practically every character reprises their role, or every significant speaking character reprises their role in the sequel, all except Kurt, and that sucks.
Hey, he moved to Canada. Yeah.
That really sucks though, because he's the one you probably want to check in the most with in the sequel, and you get like everybody else practically, even some of the minor characters. Um, and what was the thing I was going to say about that? Even and I was going to talk about him more in this movie. The guy who was like the leader, or whatever you want to call him, of the pharaohs. Of all the actors or casting in this movie, not that he was bad in this movie. It's just he had that kind of look and face that he totally looks like a random black hat from like a Western movie from the 60s or 70s. And so that would like constantly take me out of it, because I felt like a guy walked off the set of a Western and then assumed the role of head pharaoh in this movie. And so that was just like a little bit weird for me. But yeah.
I took him more as like the dark version of John. Like John going down like a dark path. Even though, I mean, okay, yeah, he's still delinquent, but even though in the end he accepted Kurt for who he was, and how kind of creative and quick thinking he was on his feet later on, and that he actually did come through. But yeah, I kind of saw those three as like the dark versions of Kurt's friends instead.
We don't get that much into Harrison Ford's character in this movie, but he seemed like the obvious foil to me of John.
There is that too.
Mm-hmm.
Even though, again, he's not as developed.
Yeah, there is that.
Yeah, we should probably start to wind it down. This is going so much longer than I would have ever imagined for this movie.
I'm surprised. But at least with the end card, sorry, Caleb, just like maybe this is like a obvious observation and kind of brain dead, and it's like, okay, well, obviously. I assumed the title card. I actually thought of this as well throughout the movie. I'm like, is this movie gonna have title cards at the end about like, where are they now? And it turns out they were. They did. I was just assuming like this is the ultimate fate of these characters, and it's like, oh, well, at least we saw John was able to, kind of have some good stuff happen to him before he died. At least in this case, we don't know what happens 2 years later, but. And Locke, I don't know where that is in regards to Terry, but like, is that combat? Like, did he go into the army later on, or what?
Yes,
I figured. Okay, yeah. If you don't mind, Eric, I literally don't know what that is. What is that referring to?
What did they say? AWOL, or what did they say? I can't remember.
And Locke, like AN, then LOC. Is that like unknown location or anonymous location?
Oh, okay. Hold on.
Yeah.
No, ANLOC is not a term or acronym I'm familiar with in the military, but I definitely took it as he's like missing in action.
Yeah, probably Vietnam.
I was thinking that too. Is like,
it's 100% Vietnam. And yeah, you can see this in the sequel if you want to know how it all turned out.
I much like 2001, I'm going to avoid talking about the sequel to this. Just I'll let it keep this on the side.
No, I just meant not talking about it, but if anyone wanted to know.
Yes, that's fair.
You could see it depicted on screen if you want.
But basically what I'm saying is that these texts basically kind of, I guess, drive the point home of what the character arcs were and what the whole movie was about for these four characters. And how, Steve basically just decided, flip it, I'll remain in, like, I assume it's Modesto. We'll just stay here for the rest of his life, potentially. And Kurt just goes to another country. I'm still surprised by that. I'm like, huh, okay.
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, thinking about having these messages at the end of this movie, because when Sean and I were discussing The Graduate, a couple months ago, it was something I was thinking about with that movie, The Graduate, that I get it, Dustin Hoffman and the girl and whatever, they're dealing with all this stuff with their coming of age in that movie, transitioning into early adulthood. And I was saying during that conversation, it's funny to think about all this mundane stuff that is like your entire world when you're that age. But I was like, but look what's going to happen. Like, um, Dustin Hoffman or his friends, like they could get involved in the war and go down that whole path, and all this stuff will seem so moot later in life when you're dealing with real life situations. Like you'll think back on your times coming of age, like, oh wow, I thought that was the be all end all time of my life, but I had no idea like how much the world was going to change and everything.
Unless Kurt's reason to moving to Canada is because he was avoiding Vietnam.
That's what I assumed. I assumed that was the obvious message they were conveying.
See, this is ignorance or whatnot, but I wouldn't have known that because, well, it's not taught in our history about that, or at least I wasn't familiar with that until years later.
Yeah, here it's just part of pop culture from movie, television, etc., or at least for people my age, not for young people. But yeah, the total implication is that he fled the draft by going to Canada. That's what you're meant to assume.
And now knowing this, that's how Cheech met Chong.
Right. And I was going to bring them up. It's almost in this, because in the WKRP aspect of that 70s show, Chong is like the actor involved in that part of that show.
That does, that makes sense. But there's this random one, by the way. Sorry, I shouldn't have pointed this out, but there's this like random bank in the background there where it says like California Canadian Bank. I'm like, what the hey is that supposed to be about?
No idea, but definitely back in the day, there was so many more independent banks everywhere in this country. It's become like the phone companies and whatnot, where everything is consolidated over time. But back in the day, oh man, there was so many private, unique branches of all different types of banks all over like different towns and cities. Yeah, it just doesn't exist nowadays anymore.
Far out, man. Informative. Caleb, anything else, sir?
Oh, I've been ready for final thoughts for a while.
All right. Well, no, we can't do final thoughts yet because we have the final act. We have the last thing that, like I said before, connects almost everybody's stories together, and that is Harrison Ford and what's going on there. So throughout the entire thing, like I said, in the setup, we had Toad, meet with Harrison Ford's character, and he's wanting to race John. He wants to race John and prove his worth. Now, I initially thought when they had their little race in the strip there, I was like, or that strip, but in the city, excuse me. I was like, oh, so he won. Then that's it. It's like, wow, he just let him win. It's like because he ran that red light. I'm like, geez. And no, I guess they actually were gonna have like a legit race. It's like, okay, I see what you mean. It's just a point of like showing how fast this vehicle could go. And it's actually over like faster than you think it is. I literally like turned away from my screen, looked at it again. It's like, holy smokes. I mean, I guess that's realistic in a way of like, yeah, a car crash can happen that fast. But yeah, this whole time, John, like, especially for John, and people have been saying like, oh, he's the fastest one. Like you said, Caleb, before, whichever guy said that. And, all culminates in like the only explosion in the entire film, I'd say. I'm surprised by that. Realistic, I'll at least say, maybe. Where his out of nowhere, like the Millennium Falcon itself breaking down in episode 5, the vehicle just either stops, something happens, and and the caveat to that is that Lori is also inside the vehicle. So it's like, oh, lovely. And that's the end.
Caleb, thoughts on that?
I very briefly, I think it was a good end. I liked John's frustration just knowing the fact that he would have lost if it hadn't been for that error. And I like the smug Harrison Ford, the whole movie. This guy thinks he's great. Just immediately fucks up. I think that's fun too.
Yeah. And also you could clearly see. I know Steve has it in his vehicle, but you can clearly see there's a skeleton on Harrison's rearview mirror, and I love that Steve has dice. Yeah. On his mirror. Sorry, I just had to make point of that.
Yeah, that's nice. No, that's nice to bring up.
Yeah, no. So that happened. Eric, any thoughts on that? Or
yeah, I agree with Caleb. I think it's a perfect ending for the events of the movie. think it's a very way to close it out. Very great way. It's a nice ending. It's tidy. It's neat. What was interesting for me watching it today was because I remember the ending, obviously, but what I couldn't remember was who crashed. So I was going into the scene with anticipation, but not knowing if it was going to be John or I can't remember his name, um, the other one who crashes. So that made it kind of exciting for me today because I had no idea which way that was going to go. But no, it's really fantastic. And I also thought about, I think it's right before we get the stupid message about what happened later. But one of the final shots I think of the film is Steve with his arm around Lori, and as they're walking off, you can see the sunrise coming up there, like over their shoulder.
Hmm.
And I was just thinking of it as being not only symbolic for the film, obviously, but just reminding me of the closing shot of THX 1138.
No, that's fair. Yeah, I felt a little bit of that too.
Yeah, I can see that too.
But yeah, I guess let's go through final thoughts, hopefully quickly, because this is the end of our Road to Star Wars series. I was hoping to do a little bit of a recap on our thoughts of the three films, maybe rank them, or maybe not. Maybe we don't have time for that now. But yeah, I guess starting with you, Eric. What's your final thoughts for this?
Really, I just want to say that I just think it's an incredible, incredible film. It's not one that I rewatch a lot because I rewatch Fast Times or Days of Confused a heck of a lot more. But that doesn't mean I like it less per se, or that I think it's not as good as those. It's just not as rewatchable for me. Oh, I forgot to mention about the prank with the police car and the axle. I didn't confirm this, but it could be an urban legend. But I think because of this movie, there was a lot of copycat antics from this movie with people trying to duplicate that scene in real life with the cop car. But anyway, it's a bona fide classic. It's probably one of those first movies. I don't know when they started doing this practice, but like preserving movies and like in the what do they call it? I don't even know what it's called. The library,
Yeah, Library of Congress, I think.
yeah, it's definitely one of those big time movies, like in that type of archive. I think it's very well deserved. This movie, again, probably had even like so much more influence on many movies to come, like much more so than THX 1138 did for its genre. It's just incredible, and it's also incredible that George Lucas doesn't have more notable films to his name post Star Wars, because it just seems like this guy has such a great eye for filmmaking in general or storytelling in general. Yeah, it's an incredible movie. There's not much more I can say about that.
Oh, Isaac?
Yeah, for the movie itself, I'm impressed. I'm definitely feeling it. That's a sign flip for I'm feeling it, and definitely want to watch this one again in the future, and would recommend everybody to watch it. Yeah, again, like I said, it's I know, like, for instance, I know Caleb and I watched this earlier this year, but like when we watched Rock and Roll High School, that was a lot of fun. That was a lot of fun and a lot better version of that like teen comedy aspect than the ones I mentioned, like Animal House or Fast Times at Ridgemont High. Those ones are,
Oh, yes.
yeah, those ones are a little bit like, yeah, not they're not my up my alley. I'll say that. But this and obviously this and Rock and Roll High School, they're going for two different things, and they're
Yes.
two different kind of genres. So, but both are really feel good movies for me in that sense. So yeah, I would definitely, prove this one and say to people, yeah, go out and watch this. And as for this mini Lucas retrospective. Yeah, Star Wars really did change him, unfortunately, because I kind of agree with Eric. Maybe Caleb, you're going to bring us down a bit and ground us a little bit. Yeah, they're like as for maybe like Francis Ford Coppola like was seeing, or whoever it was, his peers. There was something to Lucas. He did have an eye for either detail or the camera, not literally, of course, but like there was he had some things to him, and I kind of wish that he did other genres potentially to see what else he could have brought to the table and be like, all right, yeah, why not? Because he literally like this is so. In a way, I was thinking like it's so weird. He did like THX, which is like pure science fiction, and then he does this. It's like this is the same man. It's like wow, that's really impressive. That's really cool that he's able to like go into different genres, and I think that was telling of a director, with them being able to go into any genre and bring either something new to the table, different lens, or at least just be comfortable in it. And man, he felt comfortable in this. Maybe I don't know if there was some uncomfortability there, but like I'm amazed at this. So I'm not going to rank either of them, but I'm definitely feeling both of these films. So, and I guess what I'm saying is, in a way, the original Star Wars trilogy was a mistake for Lucas. I mean,
if I could just inject a few more things before Caleb gets his opportunity, real quick. I really wanted to at least touch upon the picture quality of this movie now in modern times, just because, yeah, I saw the DVD and the DVD was perfectly fine for when it came out. It was good, but when we saw THX, and I couldn't believe like how well it was preserved or remastered, or however you want to describe it. I did not think this movie was going to look the way it did. Because I guess I'm assuming I'm watching a streaming version of the 4K update, and I thought the picture quality of this movie was going to be more similar to like Clockwork Orange. So this new, I'm assuming 4K remaster is absolutely stellar. Love it. And what you were saying about how maybe Star Wars maybe ruined Lucas. I've always said this about Lucas. I think it's even more true now, and I've said it about certain other filmmakers. It seems like Peter Jackson comes to mind, but it seems like Lucas, like many others, their best work is when they had less to work with, like budget-wise, etc.
Preach. Yeah,
and that's part of what makes like the earliest Star Wars movies like the best, because or compared to the prequels or whatever, because the ingenuity that comes out of limitations. And I think that's what made Lucas so good in his early films. And I think that's probably the number one issue with his later films, is when he has quote unquote godlike powers of money. And there's other filmmakers who fall into this trap too. And I think that's what it really boils down to. And one day I will watch Red Tails, because I never have, and I've always intended to, but one of these days, and I'm curious what that one's like.
And Strange Magic.
Oh yes.
And Rise of the Guardians, or whatever that CGI film they produced was.
No, that's Strange Magic.
Oh, that's Strange Magic. My bad.
Yeah.
Okay, I got it mixed up. But anyway, sorry. I just had to.
Caleb, your final thoughts on American Graffiti, and then your final thoughts on this like duology of Lucasfilm or Lucas directed movies.
Yeah, I think for a type of genre that I really have no interest in, I think that this one succeeds more than other ones do, but still not enough to say that this is something that I'm going to be returning to much, or if at all. I think the stuff that I like in it, I like quite a bit, especially the Kurt and Terry plots. I think that stuff is great, and the John stuff. But yeah, that's just not my type of movie. I don't really return to this kind of stuff, and I probably won't return to this. But you mentioning seeing the potential with George Lucas as a filmmaker outside of Star Wars, yeah, I think he did a really good job flexing a different kind of muscle, and the sentimentality in this one I think is handled in a really nice way. I was thinking a little bit, because of Richard Dreyfuss being in here, of the Spielberg more sentimental type of movies, and I always just feel like he hams it up into the extreme and loses some of that more grounded real world feel. Everything feels like it's too artificial. I don't really feel that with this movie. I feel like the characters all feel real, the emotions feel well and grounded and naturally developed. So it is a shame that he never really moved on beyond Star Wars as a filmmaker. I mean, he did his little hand up the ass producing for a couple random things here or there. I don't really know if any of them were really successful. I've still never seen that Radioland Murders as well, but I know that one's another one where he was very hands-on. But yeah, no, I think that's my biggest takeaway from this little brief series is what a shame that the original Star Wars was such a difficult job for him that he kind of gave up directing after that. Because I feel like we could have got a lot of great movies out of him.
And one wonders, like, the loose parallels, like, to Coppola's directing career,
Hmm.
where same, like, his first movies are so incredible, they're so breaking for their respective genres, um, and then he just doesn't have much notable after that point. He has tons of passion projects. Yeah, there's Dracula, but but none of it is like the early version of him.
Hey, Dracula is great. That is a really great movie. But
No, I don't think it's terrible, but I'll have to revisit it one day because that's another one I haven't seen in a million years.
yeah, and a lot of directors do just they lose whatever creative spirit they once had, or it changes and they become a different kind of filmmaker. But if I was going to pick my favorite of these three, I do think it's probably The Hidden Fortress. For the Lucas ones, the THX 1138, I feel every time I go back to it, I like it more. But The Hidden Fortress, discovering that was just, oh, I feel like that's a movie I'm definitely going to be returning to again and again. Maybe more so than the other two. But
I agree. Or at least Hidden Fortress is my favorite of these three for sure. And it was almost a little bit of a mini revelation to revisit after all these years. And I'm still simping for the princess to this day. Really, she's absolutely incredible. However, when it comes to the Lucas stuff in particular, THX was a surprise, but American Graffiti is like a bona fide classic to me. And for its influence on filmmaking and the genre, I think it's just as important to film history as Star Wars is, just in its lane.
hmm. Yeah, and overall, I think this was quite a little successful series. Thank you, Eric, for joining me and Isaac, and Isaac, thank you for waiting for so long for me to book this thing. 3 years it's taken me to put it on the schedule, but
Well, time flew by, so
there you go.
I appreciate that.
I have no idea why this happened. I mean, I know the backstory behind baseball, but still, I don't even know how this happened. But that being said, I never would have chosen to do this myself, but having done it, it's been a delight.
Awesome.
Yeah, I would not have pictured this happening in this case, but yeah, thank you, Caleb, for having us finally do it. But now we have, well, no, not really, because we have one more thing we got to do. There's just one more thing that we have to do before this series is complete, and that is to watch Star Wars 1977. So join us next time, ladies and gentlemen, those in between and affiliated, when we have the Herculean task for the second time for us to return to that film. And hopefully we have something to bring to the table.
There you go.
Till next time, peace. And as the stinger, I looked it up. I was incorrect, of course, about Richard Dreyfuss being in 2010, the year we made contact. It was actually the character I was thinking of was the Doctor, the computer scientist, who handles Hal in that one. But actor by the name of Bob Balaban, I believe. That's
Oh,
who. That's
okay.
who I was thinking. I mean, they look alike. They literally
I could see it. Yeah.
look identical when they have glasses on. But anyway, so that was who I was thinking of. So I apologize over mistaking Richard Dreyfuss, because I thought him and Roy Schneider were in the same film together again, which is like, oh, that was kind of cool. But it turns out I was incorrect.
Schneider. Everyone always says Schneider with him.
I'm sorry, Schneider.
Yeah,
See,
yeah.
People assume it's Schneider because it's like, oh, you've heard it once, you've heard it many
Yeah.
times. Schneider. It's like, apologies.